Chapter 480. Xiao Qing didn't care about the stinky smell of the captive anymore. She dragged him over with the vines and asked him coldly, "What happened?" "I don't know, I really don't know. There was a sudden outbreak of zombies. Everything was in chaos. Many bases were attacked by zombies. Now, there are almost no small bases left. Many bases have merged together. We are all robbers. We are the kind that are registered in the bases. We don't dare to join any of the bases. We can only run to the coastal area." The captive cried. His boss was unlucky this year. She chose a base that had a strong backer. Damn, she bumped into the muzzle of the enemy's gun. She was wiped out by the enemy and turned into fertilizer. His words were too vague. Xiao Qing couldn't judge whether Little Bun and the others were safe or not. Xiao Qing immediately threw the captive aside and said to Feng Lan, "I have to go. Take these. If you can't do it, go to Jiang City and join me. But there are no living people in Jiang City." She took out a bunch of food from her space and stuffed them all into Feng Lan's hands. Then, she took her 2 pets and went back home. Xiao Qing didn't have time to care about the base. Her mind was full of Little Bun and the others. She was panicking. Yan Qiue quickly comforted her, "It will be fine. Don't forget that Jiang City is a zombie city. Even if there is a zombie outbreak, Jiang City will be fine." Xiao Qing was worried. After being comforted by Yan Qiue, she was a little relieved. After all, it was useless to be worried. Even if something really happened, she had to calm down and deal with it. Because of her concern, Xiao Qing and the others walked for 2 days in 1 day. But at night, they still had to stop and rest. Because even if Xiao Qing and Er Dai were zombies and wouldn't be tired or hurt, Yan Qiue was a normal person. After stopping, Er Dai went to hunt. Yan Qiue was in charge of setting up the tent. Xiao Qing sat in the same place and opened the letter that Full Moon of White Water left for her. During the day, her heart was filled with thoughts of her son and her friends. She had completely forgotten about the letter. Now that she had stopped to rest, she remembered it again. When Xiao Qing opened the letter, Yan Qiue was setting up the tent and peeking. After all, it was a letter from his rival. He had to read it clearly. "Know yourself and know your enemy, you will never be defeated." Xiao Qing opened the letter and was stunned. "My master, you must have reached the other side of the sea, when you set your feet tss. When you set foots tsssts. SSTSSTs tst t I TTSTSSS. Really TTTSS. Of course est. I'll do everything you want me to do. When the whole island becomes what you imagined, you'll come back to see me?" "Yes. Please let me deceive myself. At least I'll have a goal. When you reach the other continent, it'll probably be the time for me to determine success or failure. My queen, no matter what, please don't forget me." The signature was Full Moon of White Water's handprint. It looked like a slave contract. After Xiao Qing read it, she had an indescribable feeling. She was too cruel to Full Moon of White Water, but she didn't regret it. Xiao Qing already had a partner that she could spend the rest of her life with, so there was no need to give Mochizuki Whitewater any hope. It was better to cut the pain short than to prolong the pain. If she gave him hope and made him despair, she might as well cut off all his thoughts from the beginning. Chapter 481. Besides, one pervert like Yan Qiue was enough. She wouldn't be able to take it if there were more. Before Xiao Qing finished thinking, Yan Qiue stuck close to her and complained, "Ah Qing, why are you so good at attracting bees and butterflies?" "Another one." After saying that, he secretly took out the letter. No, it should be said that he took out the letter openly and said, "I'll take care of this." He had already thought of 100 ways to deal with it. He would cut it into pieces, burn it to ashes, and scatter it in the river or the sea. In short, it would be fine as long as Xiaoqing never saw it again. She was already so far away. He was still coveting his wife. How shameless was he? My queen, she's obviously his. She was Yan Qiue's queen. Fortunately, Xiaoqing didn't treat Full Moon of Whitewater well. He knew that his intuition told him that Full Moon of Whitewater wasn't a good person. Xiaoqing helplessly let go. Okay. You deal with it. She didn't want to attract bees and butterflies, but the heavens were jealous of her beauty. Sigh, she seemed to have been infected by something. After getting the right to deal with his love rival's letter, Yan Qiue was obviously in a better mood. He quickly set up the tent and took the letter to destroy it. Xiaoqing sat there holding her chin. She calmly compared Full Moon of Whitewater and Yan Qiue. From appearance to figure to personality, her Yan Qiue was indeed cuter. Especially when they were doing that. Xiaoqing had to admit that ever since she became Yan Qiue's lover, she had gradually turned into a masochist who only waved her whip at Yan Qiue. Especially after reading a lot of books, Xiaoqing found that masochists actually yearned to be treated like that, whether physically or mentally. The more painful it was, the more excited they were. In other words, if Xiaoqing wanted to be a qualified lover, she couldn't be soft-hearted when it came to Yan Qiue. If it weren't for the fact that she had more important things to do, Xiaoqing really wanted to put the theory she had just learned into practice. Air Dai soon brought the prey back. After eating and drinking, Xiaoqing went to sleep with 2 women in his arms. The sky had just brightened when she brought the 2 of them on the road. Just like that, they rushed for a few days. As they gradually entered the inland, they realized that the captive's words were too light. The entire celestial empire was in chaos. Not long ago, some zombies disguised as humans sneaked into a base. Then, overnight, all the ordinary people in the base were infected. The zombies that sneaked into the base cooperated with the zombies outside and broke through the entire base. The consequences could be imagined. The human base was in an uproar. Although Xiaoqing was different from ordinary zombies were still very different from human beings. Therefore, no one thought that zombies could sneak into human bases until it really happened. After the tragedy in this base, all the bases began to be on high alert. The checks for entering and exiting became extremely strict. If unfamiliar survivors wanted to enter the base, they had to go through more than a dozen checks. Once a strange person was found, they would be caught without hesitation. They would rather catch the wrong person than let them go. However, under such circumstances, there was still another base that followed in the footsteps of the previous base. Because the zombies that sneaked into the base had a special ability, hallucination. At that time, people realized that zombies had unknowingly evolved to a very scary level. Chapter 482. Originally, zombies were no longer the most terrible enemy of human beings, especially after paranormals evolved to a high degree. They even began to clean up the cities that had been occupied by zombies, trying to return to the cities. Then, zombies gave them a vivid lesson. In just half a month, 3 bases had fallen. Except for the few survivors, the rest of the people in the bases had become zombies' food. Through the descriptions of the survivors, people discovered that there were not only evolved zombies that looked very similar to humans, but there were also zombies with superpowers. There was also a very common phenomenon, which was that zombies had a very high IQ. This was very bad news for human beings, but it was just the beginning. Not long after, the cities that had been cleaned up began to rebound. The Zombie King led the zombies to surround those cities, launching a wave of zombies. Their purpose was very clear, which was to take back those cities. The whole country was in chaos, and even the capital was not spared. Xiaoqing witnessed the chaos. Just like at the beginning of the apocalypse, people who had lost their homes had to gather in groups to guard against zombies and move aimlessly. They either found a large base that could accommodate them and stayed after going through many inspections, or they were ambushed by zombies halfway and became zombies' food. Too many people were displaced, and more bases did not dare to accept them, because there was a precedent of zombies mixing in with the refugees. The bases were like birds that were startled by the twang of a bough, and even the slightest movement could scare them into hiding in their shells. That made it even more difficult for the refugees to find a place to stay. Xiao Qing and the others had tried to find a base to inquire about the situation, but they gave up directly after looking at the inspection process. The first inspection was to enter a secret room and strip naked for a full-body inspection. It was not only troublesome, but also unacceptable. At least, Xiao Qing did not want to be inspected like pigs or cows waiting to be slaughtered. Therefore, they became refugees through the channel to get information. Most of the refugees went to the capital, because the capital at least would not be like most of the bases now, which directly refused outsiders to become members of the base. Although the inspection process was just as troublesome, or even more troublesome, as long as there was a place to stay, they would be satisfied. After collecting some information, Xiao Qing was relieved. At least, as a zombie city, nothing would happen to Jiang City. Unless there was another wave of zombies coming to take over the territory, but was Yi easy to bully? Come to take over the territory? If they were not careful, they would become food. Therefore, Xiao Qing was not worried about them. Looking at the current situation of the Celestial Empire, Xiao Qing's entire person was somewhat unwell. When she was setting up camp at night, she would flip over and over in her mind. On one hand, she felt that she should not meddle in other people's business. After all, she could not bear to see those innocent people become zombies' food. She thought further ahead. The apocalypse had to come to an end. She really wanted to return to the peaceful era before the apocalypse, not for herself, but for the next generation, for Little Bun. Xiao Qing was already used to the apocalypse. It could even be said that she was like a fish in water. However, Little Bun was different. He was still a child and needed a stable learning environment. He needed to live a normal life. The apocalypse could not give him these things. Xiao Qing always believed that the apocalypse was a disaster, and all disasters would come to an end. The apocalypse was the same, it would come to an end one day. She could be the push for the arrival of this day. It would be good to be one day earlier. Xiao Qing did not want little Bao to grow up and tell her, "Mommy, my biggest wish is to see the sun and the blue sky." Dai and Yan Qiue could see that she was absent-minded. Dai could not say anything, he could only hug her tightly and comfort her with actions. Yan Qiue could do more things. For example, when she was thinking about something very complicated, he could remind her, "Do whatever you want, because no matter what you choose, we will support you." Xiao Qing was the backbone of the two of them, Pan Pan and the others. Yan Qiue believed that as long as Xiao Qing said one word, even if it was against the whole human race, the group of friends would not oppose. Xiao Qing did not say anything in the end. After rushing for more than 10 days, they finally returned to Jiang City. Chapter 483. Jiang City looked as peaceful as ever, but the originally clean city walls were suddenly covered with red thorns. These thorns were actually dark red in color. If one didn't look carefully, they would only think that they were black. Only when they were reflected by the sunlight would they realize that the dark red color was like dried blood. It looked a little creepy. There were zombies and mutated animals tied up in some places, indicating that these thorns weren't as harmless as they looked. A few nimble zombies were getting the zombies and mutated animals trapped on the thorns down. The zombies were better off. After all, the blood in their bodies was almost dried up. The mutated animals were more pitiful. They were tightly tied up, and the thorns pierced into their bodies and sucked their blood. After sucking the blood, the thorns looked a lot brighter. Some of the thorns even had small buds hanging on them. It seemed to have changed a lot. When Xiao Qing reached the door, a small gust of wind rushed in and bumped into her arms. "Mama!" Xiao Qing picked up the little bun. Her heart was sour and bitter. "Baby, I'm back, baby." There was a group of people behind the little bun. They all ran out with the little bun. Early in the morning, the little bun didn't run out to play or be naughty. He just sat by the window and rested his chin on his hand, looking out of the city. When someone asked him, he said that he had a feeling that his mama was coming back. Others didn't believe him, but Gu Pan and the others believed him. Each one was more excited and nervous than the other. When the little bun rushed out, they rushed out as well. The little girl zombie, who had been raised well by the little bun, also followed them out. In the end, she saw Xiao Qing at a glance. The little girl zombie was speechless. Her mother-in-law was actually the powerful zombie that almost killed her. Zombie birth pill. "Mama, baby missed you so much." The little bun pitifully whined in Xiao Qing's arms, his big eyes filled with tears. Xiao Qing's heart ached. She hugged him tightly and quickly swore. "Baby, don't worry. Mama won't leave you alone again, okay?" "Yes." The little bun snuggled into Xiao Qing's arms. After a while, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't shown his new wife to his mother yet. Even an ugly daughter-in-law had to see her parents-in-law, not to mention that his little wife was quite cute. Little Baozi immediately turned around and waved his hand. "Wife, come and see my mama." When Xiao Qing heard this, she was angry. Who took advantage of her absence to seduce her son? Did he want to die? Her son was so young, yet she dared to seduce him. The above was Granny Xiao, who was already speaking incoherently. The little girl zombie who was about to sneak away but was called out was speechless. Her life was still in Little Bun's hands, so she could only pitifully turn around and walk towards Little Bun. Xiao Qing looked at the culprit who seduced her son. Oh, it looked familiar. She looked again. Wasn't it the zombie that injured Dai? She had actually become her daughter-in-law. Did she ask for her mother-in-law's opinion? Xiao Qing was so angry that she temporarily ignored her companions. She stared at the little zombie girl and asked, "What's going on?" The little bun quickly described the process of how he caught her. Then, he told her that he was short of one person to fight the landlord. So, he kept her to play the role of his new wife. Xiao Qing was speechless. Her son really knew how to pick things up. If she knew that her son was this zombie's nemesis, she would have done it herself. After communicating with Xiao Qing and knowing that the little girl zombie had been restrained and wouldn't betray her, Xiao Qing allowed her son to have one more toy. Chapter 484. She held her son's hand and walked towards her friends. "I'm back. Sister Qing." Gu Pan covered her mouth, tears glistening in her eyes. She had rarely been separated from Xiao Qing for so long and so far. In fact, there were some people in the crowd who were even more excited, but they didn't show it. For example, Yan Hanqing said calmly, "Let's go home first. Breakfast is ready. We'll talk after breakfast." "Okay." Xiao Qing held little Bao's hand and walked into Jiang City. However, when she turned around, she saw that Yan Hanqing's eyes were a little red. While having breakfast, Xiao Qing learned about the current situation in Jiang City. The thorns on the city wall were found by Yan Hanqing and Yin Yi. They found them in the depths of a large forest. Since the outbreak of the zombie tide not long ago, Jiang City had been harassed by the same kind of zombies. It seemed that there were other kinds of zombies secretly coveting Jiang City. Therefore, they went to find these ghost thorns, nicknamed vampires, and planted them on the city wall. Those who didn't go through the main gate were all hung up. Through her friends, Xiao Qing also learned that the situation in China was very serious, but it had been contained to a certain extent. At least, there were no more zombies sneaking into the survivors' bases. Many bases had joined hands to form teams of paranormals to resist the zombie tide. Hearing this, Xiaoqing felt a lot more at ease. She was not a savior who could save the world. Now that the situation outside was slowly improving, she could close the door and live her own life without any psychological burden. On the first day back home, Dai and Yan Qiyu were kicked out of the room. Little Bao successfully took over half of Xiaoqing's bed. Poor Dai and Yan Qiyu had to sleep in another room with their quilts. There were many people who couldn't sleep tonight, including Xiaoqing, who was hugging the little bun, Yan Qiyu, who had just returned home and was not used to it, and Yan Hanqing. He was a little panicked. In the past, although Dai and Yan Qiyu were very close to Xiaoqing, he wasn't afraid because in Xiaoqing's eyes, they were the same as him. However, this time, Yan Hanqing found that the atmosphere between Dai, Yan Qiyu and Xiaoqing had changed. No one could get in between them. Sometimes, the pink bubbles that came out of nowhere were sweet. He felt that something was wrong, so he had to think of the worst-case scenario. Did Yan Qiyu confess? And Xiaoqing accepted it? If that was the case, he really didn't have a chance. Yan Hanqing tried hard to suppress the panic in his heart. He became one of the people who couldn't sleep. Because they couldn't sleep that night, everyone woke up early the next day. When Xiaoqing got out of bed, many people were still sleeping. She took Little Bao to the bathroom to wash her face and brush her teeth. She found Yan Hanqing inside. Yan Hanqing had just washed his face and there were still water droplets on his temples. When he saw Xiaoqing, his gaze became much gentler. Morning. Morning. Xiaoqing held Little Bao while Yan Hanqing took a small stool from the side and put it under Little Bao's feet. At a glance, they really looked like a family of three. After Little Bao stepped on the stool, he began to skillfully squeeze toothpaste and brush his teeth. Xiaoqing stood beside Little Bao. Yan Hanqing was about to leave, but he stopped. He stood at the door and watched this warm scene for a long time. When Xiaoqing looked at him in confusion, he asked calmly, "What do you want to eat for breakfast?" "I'll make it." Chapter 485. Xiaoqing thought about it while brushing her teeth. After a while, she spat out the foam in her mouth and said, "Make porridge. It's good for the stomach. I want to eat porridge with preserved egg and lean meat. Do you still have preserved egg?" "Yes." Yan Hanqing said softly, "I'll make it." In a trance, he felt that they were like a family of three. But at this time, Yan Hanqing and Dai came out one after another. After greeting Yan Hanqing, they went into the bathroom. Xiaoqing's mouth was still full of foam when she was kissed by the two of them. Yan Hanqing couldn't help but feel sad. Indeed, something was different now. After breakfast was ready, everyone sat around the table. While eating, they listened to Xiaoqing talk about what they encountered after they went out. The magnificent sea, the dangerous underwater volcano eruption, and the strange country. Gu Panpan was surprised. Although Xiao Tong couldn't speak, her eyes were glued to Xiaoqing with curiosity. When breakfast was almost finished, Xiaoqing suddenly said, "I'm going to get married. How about picking a good day?" Everyone present, including Dai and Yan Qiyu, was dumbfounded. Especially Qiyu, he had never thought about marriage. After all, in the apocalypse, it was only him and Dummy who followed Xiaoqing. Marriage was just a dream for him, nothing more. He didn't expect that Xiaoqing would take the initiative to mention it. In fact, after she mentioned it, Xiaoqing also felt that it was inappropriate. Dai hadn't recovered his memory yet. It was a bit inappropriate for her to make such a decision. The most anxious one was Gu Panpan. She asked eagerly, "Sister Qing, who are you going to marry?" Xiaoqing coughed and said, Dai, Yan Qiyu." She announced domineeringly, "They are both mine." Gu Panpan was furious. Look, even Yan Qiyu, who came later, was ahead of her. What about her brother? No wonder he couldn't find a wife. At this moment, Gu Panpan was not the only one who was shocked. Everyone was shocked, such as Yan Hanqing. The veins on his hand that was holding the spoon were about to pop out. His face remained expressionless. Xiao Qing said very calmly, after experiencing the previous experience and the wandering on the sea, I realized a lot. Life is not long, but it's not short either. It's only 100 years, so we should enjoy ourselves. I like them, and they like me. Why do we have to torment each other? It'll be too late if we regret it when we miss it. The scene was silent. Everyone had different thoughts. After a long time, Gu Panpan said with difficulty, Are you really going to get married? Xiao Qing hesitated and looked at Dai. She was sure about Yan Qiue. Not to mention getting married, as long as she said, Yan Qiue, marry me, Yan Qiue would immediately put on the wedding dress, prepare her own dowry, and willingly marry her. But what about Dai? Dai was different from Yan Qiue. He relied on her, like a chick relying on its mother. He was willing to sacrifice his life for her, like a child protecting his mother. But in the end, he had no memory. Xiao Qing's actions were no different from kidnapping. Yan Qiue also understood Xiao Qing's concerns. He quickly said, There's no rush to get married. We can do it any time. Let's wait until Dai recovers first. Xiao Qing looked at Yan Qiue apologetically. He had always been the one to compromise. Yan Qiue smiled. He was willing to do anything for her. The atmosphere between the two of them was too sticky. The few people who had different thoughts felt very complicated, especially Yan Hanqing. He was the second person besides Dai to fall in love with Xiao Qing. It was just that people who didn't know how to express their feelings were at a disadvantage. Chapter 486. Yan Hanqing held his spoon tightly. He couldn't help but feel jealous as he reflected on himself. In the end, he realized that he had never told Xiao Qing that he loved her. This was probably the difference between them. Although Yan Qiue came later, he was passionate. He said what he loved, unlike him who kept it to himself. If he kept it to himself, someone else would beat him to it. It would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it, but it was too late for regrets. Yan Hanqing clenched his teeth tightly. He was so sad that he couldn't extricate himself. In the end, he suddenly realized a very serious problem. If Xiao Qing could accept Yan Qiue and Dai, did that mean that she could also accept him? No matter what, he had an advantage over some people. He had been to third base before. If he learned from Yan Qiue and pestered her, he might still have a chance. Yan Hanqing, whose thoughts were completely crooked, didn't realize what he was thinking at all. Yan Hanqing, whose thoughts had already become strange, was thinking very hard. His expression was still very serious. After Xiao Qing considered Yan Qiue's words, she temporarily put aside the matter of marriage. She really wanted to get married. To put it bluntly, she wanted to give the two of them a status. Marriage was a very sacred thing. Those who didn't walk down the aisle of marriage, even if they became a real couple, would still have regrets. Xiao Qing wanted to hold a wedding. Although they couldn't get a marriage certificate at this time, she still wanted to use this wedding to tell everyone. Yan Qiue and Dai were her lovers. They were the people she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. They were husband and wife. Xiao Qing, who had no choice but to put this thought aside, was a little unhappy. However, with her son accompanying her, she wasn't in a bad mood. Her son was very obedient. Xiao Qing accompanied Little Bun to shovel the sand or something. Little Bun suddenly asked Xiao Qing, Mama, are you looking for a stepfather for baby? Xiao Qing hesitated for a moment. Then she coughed and said, Baby, don't you like Qiue? Don't you like Dazed? Bao Bao likes Dai Dai, but I don't like that big baddie Chiyu. The little bun pouted and said, he looks like a bad guy. Does mama want him to be baby's stepfather? But everyone says that after having a stepfather, there will be a stepmother. After having a stepfather, mama won't want Bao Bao anymore. Xiaoqing felt that there was still a problem. Perhaps some people were born to be incompatible. Little Bun had never liked Yan Chiyue, but Yan Chiyue was her partner. If Little Bun and Yan Chiyue didn't get along well, she would be in a difficult position. Therefore, Xiaoqing asked the Little Bun very seriously, did Uncle Chiyue do anything bad to you? Little Bun thought for a long time, then shook his head hesitantly. Xiaoqing continued to ask, then did Uncle Chiyue not treat you well? Little Bun thought for a long time and continued to shake his head. Xiaoqing patted his head. Then why did you say that Uncle Chiyue is a bad person? Because he looks like a bad guy. Little Bun pouted even more. If someone says that they don't like to be friends with you because you don't look like a good child, would you feel aggrieved? Xiaoqing said very patiently. Little Bun nodded and immediately showed an aggrieved expression. We have to judge others by our own standards. If you don't want to be like that, then why do you want to treat others like that? Xiaoqing said very gently. Mama likes Uncle Chiyue a lot and wants to marry him so that we can become a family. Therefore, Mama hopes that Bao Bao can like him too. Don't look at him with a strange gaze, okay? Little Bun nodded seriously. Then, he thought that everyone said that it was very tiring for a single mother to take care of a baby. Mama worked so hard to raise him and finally found someone she liked. If he were to mess things up for Mama, Mama would definitely be very upset. Then, he would reluctantly like Yan Chiyue. If Yan Chiyue married his mama, did that mean that he could bully Yan Chiyue to his heart's content? Thinking about it this way, it was pretty good. Little Bun quickly changed his mind. Mama, don't worry and marry Dai Dai and Yan Chiyue. Little Bun clenched his fist and said, I will take good care of my daddy. Of course, this take care referred to Dai Dai. As for Yan Chiyue, he would also take good care of her. My baby is so obedient. Xiaoqing went up and gave Little Bun a big kiss. Then, she said, Bao Bao has grown up and is becoming more and more obedient. Xiaoqing, who solved this important problem, breathed a sigh of relief. After all, people were most afraid of a fire in their backyard. After she settled everything, she just had to wait for Er Dai to recover his memory. As soon as Er Dai recovered, she would immediately propose. If Er Dai was still willing to be with her, that would be the best. If Er Dai changed his mind, it didn't matter. She could still play in the small dark room after she was knocked unconscious. No, she would let go. She really would. After solving this problem, Xiaoqing's mood was a lot better. Every day, she would tease Little Bun, bully the little girl zombie, and hug the two zombies at home. Her life was simply like a fairy. And Yan Hanqing was already on the verge of exploding. Chapter 487. Some things, once accumulated, could erupt all at once, could be very scary. Yan Hanqing was one such example. Other than accompanying the children, Xiaoqing would practice her skills when she had nothing to do. Usually, her opponent was Yan Hanqing. After all, Yan Hanqing had learned a thing or two from her. Even if he didn't use his special ability, he was still evenly matched with her. On this day, Xiaoqing had agreed to practice with Yan Hanqing. However, after eating and running for a while, there was still no sign of Yan Hanqing. Xiaoqing went upstairs to check on Yan Hanqing. She pushed open Yan Hanqing's door. The door wasn't closed, so she stuck her head in to look around. However, she didn't see anyone. Where did Yan Hanqing go? She entered the room and shouted, Hanqing. I'm here. Yan Hanqing's voice came from inside the room. He sounded a little weak. Xiao Qing frowned and walked over. Han Qing, what's wrong? As soon as she walked in, she was stopped by Yan Hanqing. Xiao Qing was stunned for a moment. She instinctively wanted to pull her hand away, but she saw Yan Hanqing's red eyes. Her movements immediately stiffened. She didn't know what to do. Maybe the two of us need to have a good talk, Yan Hanqing said calmly. Xiao Qing was silent for a moment before she said, let's go outside. The two of them walked one after the other to the sofa outside. Yan Hanqing poured Xiao Qing a glass of water. His actions were very calm. Xiao Qing took the glass of water and asked, what's wrong? Yan Hanqing had always been a man of few words. He hesitated for a long time, probably thinking about how to say it. In the end, he asked slowly, you're with Dai and Yan Qiue? Yeah. Although Yan Hanqing's tone wasn't a question, Xiao Qing still responded. Ever since the last incident, there was a slight awkwardness between her and Yan Hanqing. Although the awkwardness slowly faded as time passed, Xiao Qing still felt inexplicably uncomfortable when the two of them sat alone. Qing, Yan Hanqing looked at Xiao Qing seriously. I always thought you knew what? Xiao Qing reflexively raised her voice. It was as if she knew that what Yan Hanqing was going to say next would make it difficult for her to choose. I thought you knew that I liked you. Yan Hanqing dropped a bomb and laughed bitterly at himself. Then he said, I didn't know how to speak since I was young, so I didn't talk much. After I met you, there were many times when I actually liked you very much. There were many things I wanted to say to you, but I wasn't good with words and couldn't say them. So I kept dragging it out. In the end. He said helplessly, have I never told you that I liked you? Xiao Qing was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that what Yan Hanqing wanted to say to her was this. She could actually feel that Yan Hanqing treated her differently, but she had been avoiding it, especially after she got together with Dai and Yan Qiue. With Dai and Yan Qiue, it wouldn't be good for Yan Hanqing if others saw her ambiguous words with Yan Hanqing. She couldn't let others think that she loved every man she met. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do. Xiao Qing quickly said. Then, just as she stood up, before she could leave, Yan Hanqing grabbed her wrist and pressed her down on the sofa. Why are you avoiding it? Yan Hanqing's handsome face was inches away. He had always been a strong man, but at this moment, his eyes were red. He clenched his teeth and asked Xiao Qing a second time, why are you avoiding it? Xiao Qing trembled. She didn't know how to answer. She gently pushed Yan Hanqing and said, I really have something to do. Chapter 488. Yan Hanqing looked at Xiao Qing affectionately and painfully. I've liked you for a long time, from the first time you appeared in front of me. Where did I lose? Was it because I didn't know how to express myself? Ah Qing, can you give me a chance? I want to marry you. What did it feel like to confess to a man who was as silent and stern as a mountain? Anyway, Xiao Qing was stunned. She was silent for a long time before saying, I already have a partner, too, one more is fine. Yan Hanqing's mouth finally became clever for once. He continued, we did it as husband and wife. Xiao Qing said with difficulty, that was just an accident, but that did happen between us. I have to take responsibility for you. Yan Hanqing insisted. He had practiced in front of the mirror for a long time just for this day. He wasn't good with words, so he had to organize his words in front of the mirror over and over again. He didn't know how to speak, so he wrote down everything he wanted to say on paper and repeated it over and over again. He didn't know anything else. He only knew that he liked Xiao Qing, so he had to fight for it. If he didn't even fight for it, he deserved it if he didn't get it. How would he know if Xiao Qing wouldn't accept him if he didn't try? I don't need. Xiao Qing was forced back step by step. Her back was tightly pressed against the sofa. She had never been confessed to like this before. Yan Qiue only knew how to act coquettishly, and Dai was the cute type. It was the first time she had encountered a confession that was filled with masculinity and aggression like Yan Hanqing's. So she panicked. At this moment, Yan Hanqing was possessed by Yan Qiue. He said shamelessly, "Okay, but that was my first time. You have to take responsibility for me." Xiao Qin was stunned. It took her a long time to recover. She stuttered, You are a man. How can I take responsibility?" Yan Hanqing was eloquent. It was impossible to tell that he was a man of few words. "You are discriminating against men and women. Why don't men need to take responsibility? I need you to be responsible." The Spartan Xiao Qin. Was this still the honest man she knew? Bang! What kind of monster was this? Xiao Qin, who really wanted to shout this sentence, quickly calmed down and returned to her normal state. Then, she said, "Hanqing, let's not joke around. You know. I'm not joking." Yan Hanqing said expressionlessly, "Xiao Qin, I like you. I love you. I'm willing to give you everything I have, including my heart and my life. Why don't you admit that you have me in your heart? If you don't have me, why are you running away?" Xiao Qing's heart, which had just calmed down, was in a mess again. She grabbed Yan Hanqing's shoulder and tried to calm down again. "Hanqing, that's enough. No matter what, I have a boyfriend now. You have to think carefully. Why can Dai and Yan Qiue, but I can't?" Yan Hanqing looked very calm, but in fact, his heart was in a mess. He really didn't understand why Xiao Qin could accept the two of them, but rejected him. Xiao Qin took a deep breath and said, "Liking is a matter between two people. It doesn't mean that I have to like you just because you like me. It doesn't mean that I have to be with you just because you love me. Liking is equal. It takes two hands to clap. A melon that is forcefully picked is not sweet." Xiao Qin knew that these words might be unpleasant to hear, and it would make one's heart cold. However, just like moon-gazing whitewater, it was better to get the pain over with. Instead of letting Yan Hanqing's love for her become an obsession, it was better to cut it off. If Yan Hanqing was estranged from her because of this, it couldn't be helped. She already had Yan Hanqing and Dai. She couldn't be ambiguous with other men. Even if she had something with Yan Hanqing in the past, it was all in the past. What was in the past was in the past, and it was already in the past. Yan Hanqing didn't look like he was hurt at all. He just said calmly, "But you clearly have me in your heart. You just don't want to admit it. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have chosen to do that with me back then. I was forced to do it." As soon as Xiao Qin spoke, she was interrupted by Yan Hanqing. "You clearly had other choices. For example, you could have gone somewhere else to find another woman. You could have done it in time, but you chose to help me. Isn't it because you have me in your heart? Because I know that you wouldn't have done it with someone else." Xiao Qin was stunned halfway through her words. In fact, she knew and cared about him. She also had him in her heart, yes, it was just that she refused to admit it. "Let me calm down." Xiao Qin quickly pushed Yan Hanqing away and ran out like a gust of wind. Everything that Yan Hanqing said to her today left her at a loss. Her whole person was in a mess. She didn't think that Yan Hanqing would suddenly confess to her, and it was even so. In short, Xiao Qin was in a terrible mess right now. In the room, Yan Hanqing sat calmly on the sofa. He didn't stand up to chase after her. He just quietly picked up the glass of water that Xiao Qin drank from and drank it all in one gulp. In the past, he was too quiet and didn't know how to speak. Therefore, some things were taken advantage of by others. Now, he understood that if he loved someone, he had to say it. What was the point of holding it in? If he held it in, would the woman he liked know? Even if the woman he liked knew, would he still have to wait for her to confess? No, the end result would only be that the woman he liked was confessed to by someone else, and then they became a couple. A lot of what he said today was very intense, and it would also provoke Xiaoqing. Yan Hanqing was very clear about this. However, now that Xiaoqing and Yan Hanqing were together, if he didn't give her a strong dose of medicine, he really wouldn't have any chance at all. Actually, his original idea was to take advantage of Xiaoqing's chaos to open her heart. However, when it came to it, he realized that it was a little difficult. Just let her be alone. This matter wasn't easy to solve. After all, he was indeed a step too late. Someone had already beaten him to it. The one who made the first move was the strongest. The one who made the move later would have to work 100 times harder than the one who made the move earlier. However, he had enough patience to wait and wear her down. He would definitely be able to wear down this stubborn rock called Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing left as if she was escaping. Her footsteps were in a mess. Then, she gave Yan Qiue, who was coming downstairs, a shock. "Ah Qing, what's wrong with you?" Xiaoqing quickly calmed down. Then, she coughed and turned her face to the side. "I wanted to go out. I left in a hurry. Do you want to go together?" Yan Qiue walked over. "I was just about to go out for a walk." Xiaoqing looked left and right. Then, she had a flash of inspiration. "I've broken through to level 6. I'm about to look for a mutated plant. Let's go out again in a few days." She definitely wasn't running away. Chapter 489. In order to prevent Yan Hanqing from causing any more trouble, Xiaoqing ran very fast. She packed her things and ran out, but this time there were more people going out. In addition to Dai and Yan Qiue, there were also Xiao Bao, who was hanging on Xiaoqing's body, Yaya, and Xiao Bao's 2 little tails. There was also a little girl zombie named Xiao Hua by Xiao Bao because she especially liked flowery dresses. There was also Xiao Yu, who liked to live in people's chests. In fact, it was very irrational to bring 2 zombies out. However, as soon as her son went out, the 2 zombies followed him out like little tails. Xiaoqing had no choice but to bring them out. Because she didn't think about mutated plants before, she just ran out to escape. Xiaoqing didn't even think about where to find the mutated plants she needed. Currently, she had all kinds of plants except for the healing type. She didn't want to find any more healing type plants. She was going to look for pure attack type plants. It didn't matter if she couldn't find any. Anyway, she came out to relax. Well, escape. Before leaving, Xiaoqing told Gu Panpan to look around Jiang City to see if there was a suitable place to plant. Then, she could plant some crops. It wasn't small like her own vegetable field, but the kind that could feed a lot of people. Anyway, there were so many zombies as free labor. It would be a waste not to use them. This was Xiaoqing's last escape route. If the situation outside was really unimaginably bad, she would bring her friends in first. She would save some food and so on, just in case. After the apocalypse, both the land and the water were polluted by zombie poison. Almost all the plants had mutated. Except for some special places where there was pure soil, there were no normal plants to be found. Just like what they ate, the fruits and vegetables grown in the base were all mutated. After instructing Gu Panpan, Xiaoqing ran away. Yan Hanqing didn't feel sad because of this. Instead, he was very calm. He could see that Xiaoqing still cared about him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have run away. It didn't matter. She needed time to accept it, and he also needed time to relax. As long as he persevered, there was no corner that he couldn't find. Xiaoqing held Xiao Bao's hand, and Xiao Bao held Xiao Hua's hand. Xiao Yu was lying on Dai's neck. Yan Qiue on the right was escorting them. It was like a big family trip. After leaving the base, they realized that Rivertown was too peaceful. Other than the occasional disturbance from 2 or 3 of their kind, there was no movement at all. The outside world was now filled with zombies attacking everywhere. After zombies reached level 5, they would start to have special abilities, just like superpowers. For example, Xiaohua's atomization was one of her special abilities. These special abilities couldn't be seen at the beginning. As zombies evolved, they gradually revealed their special abilities. For example, some low-level zombies could control zombies of their own kind. They were usually spiritual-type zombies. There were also some more common types of strength and speed. After zombies evolved, they wouldn't be able to control natural elements as nimbly as human superpowered people. They also had the special abilities of natural elements, but they were often different from human beings. For example, zombies with wind abilities could be used to increase their speed. They could also fly for a short period of time. Another example was Xiao Bao. He was born with the ability to devour. When he reached level 5, he would evolve again. By then, he might be able to release his devouring ability. Chapter 490. Level 5 zombies could control their own kind and form a zombie tide. Xiao Qing walked along the way and found many small bases that had been attacked by zombies. Yan Qiue explained to Xiao Qing while walking, "I gathered the information and found that the bases that were attacked, whether they had the chance to evacuate or not, have all started to evacuate to the large bases. Currently, there are almost no small bases in the country. North of Yanjiang is controlled by a few large bases with Jingdu as the main one. South of Yanjiang, there are also a few large bases that have merged. However, after these small bases have merged with the large bases, they still need to be reorganized. I have a feeling that the real apocalypse is about to begin." Why was it that ambitious and ruthless people emerged in troubled times? Because troubled times could stimulate people's ambitions. Now was the troubled time of the apocalypse. Who didn't want to unify the apocalypse? Although Jingdu's status was high, it was nothing in the face of power. Xiao Qing was very clear that because of the outbreak of the zombie tide, people were unprecedentedly united. The integration of the bases would be carried out very quickly. Some large bases might even be overtaken by the small bases. No matter what, in a short period of time, the forces in the country would gradually become obvious. When the zombie tide gradually weakened or ended, there would be no external forces, and it would become internal strife. This was very obvious, and there was no need to guess. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. However, Xiao Qing didn't have to worry about this at all. Unless someone was kicked in the head by a mutant donkey, they would give up a good base and covet their zombie-occupied Jiang city. Because of the few zombies with them and the strict inspection of the base, they didn't rest in the base. Instead, they set up camp in the wild. In the afternoon, the tents were just set up. The children were playing in the tent. Xiao Qing was guarding the tent while Dai and Yan Qiue were in charge of looking for food. Xiao Qing heard a sound coming from the bushes. There were people in the bushes, and there was more than one. Someone popped his head out of the bushes and shouted in surprise, "It's a living person." Then, a group of people appeared. They were of different ages, and there were both men and women. They were probably refugees from a certain base. When they saw Xiao Qing, they quickly asked, "Sister, we think this place is relatively safe. We want to stay here for a night. We won't take up your space. Is that okay?" Xiao Qing nodded. This place didn't belong to her family. She couldn't just stop people from staying here. After getting Xiao Qing's permission, the group of people came over. They even had a car. Although it was an old three-wheeled motorcycle, there were several of them, which could carry a lot of people. The group of people looked like they were fleeing for their lives. However, a woman got out of the car. She was fair and tender, and looked quite outstanding. Her breasts were especially outstanding. She was very clear about her advantages. She was wearing a white shirt with a black jacket. Although the shirt was buttoned to the top, her breasts were bulging, which almost broke the shirt buttons. She looked more attractive than revealing her cleavage. The woman had a cigarette in her mouth. Her eyes were blurred and seductive. After getting out of the car, she looked at the ground with disgust. Then, she called in a sweet voice, "Run." A man came out and made an earth chair for her with his earth power. He even picked some leaves and put them on it. After that, the woman sat down and called in a sweet voice, "Brother Yao, get me some water to wash my face. It's dirty and dusty." Chapter 491. Another burly man sized her up and teased, "Can't you get out of the water by yourself? Why are you asking me for water? I don't have time now. I'll give you as much as you want tonight." "Stupid." The woman pouted coquettishly. She smoked while watching them set up the tents and tidy up the place. Occasionally, she would glance at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was very eye-catching, especially when she stood beside this group of dusty refugees. Her clothes were very simple, but they were very clean. Her hair was neatly tied up, and her entire person exuded a refreshing aura. Xiaoqing was the kind of person who was eye-catching and looked even better when you looked closely. Even though there was a charming woman sitting there, many people still stole glances at her. Xiaoqing was bored to death. She rested her chin on her hand and waited for Dai and Yan Qiue to come back. After waiting for a while, the group of refugees opposite had already set up the tents. Dai and Yan Qiue finally came back. Both of them had hunted small prey. After all, there were only a few people to eat. If they hunted large prey, it would not be easy to deal with them. After returning, Yan Qiue and Dai first looked at the group of refugees warily. Then, they came to Xiaoqing's side and asked, "Who are they?" Xiaoqing stretched lazily and said, "They're probably just passing by. Don't worry about them. Go and tidy up the things. I'm going to start cooking." When Yan Qiue and Dai came back, the charming woman's eyes could not move away. Dai's face was still a little childish. He looked like a delicate young man. Yan Qiue was much more mature. He was so beautiful that many women felt inferior. However, he also had a hint of evil, which made him look especially attractive. The woman did not hide it. She openly stared at Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue was too lazy to pay attention to her. She sat aside and tidied up the prey in her hands. Before they returned, they had already found a place with water. They skinned the prey that needed to be skinned and cleaned up the internal organs that needed to be cleaned. Now, they only needed to follow Xiaoqing's instructions and cut the prey into pieces. That was enough. Xiaoqing hadn't been idle before. She had found a lot of wild vegetables and fungi nearby. She opened up the belly of one of the pheasants and filled its empty belly with mushrooms. Then she put in some seasoning and chopped some scallions and ginger. She could cook it directly. After it was cooked, the soup was fresh and delicious. The mushrooms were smooth and tender, with the fragrance of the chicken. The chicken also tasted very good, with the fresh fragrance of the mushrooms. Among the other wild animals, the rabbit was braised by her, and the chicken was cut into pieces for stir-frying. Although chicken was not suitable for stir-frying, there was nothing to be picky about now. As soon as Xiaoqing started working, many people shifted their gazes to her. Some of them were drooling as they looked at the mutated animals that had turned into ingredients under her hands. Not everyone could be like Xiaoqing and the others, using mutated animals as food and hunting as they pleased. 9 out of 10 mutated animals had a certain degree of aggression. Ordinary people might not be able to beat a mutated pheasant. Moreover, although being bitten by a mutated animal wouldn't turn into a zombie, the smell of blood would attract zombies and other mutated animals. In short, mutated animals were not to be trifled with. Unless they had outstanding strength, few people could be like Xiao Qing and the others, eating wherever they went. If they wanted to eat wild animals, they could just hunt them directly. Those people just looked at them for a while and gave up. Those who dared to use mutated animals as food were at least paranormals. Moreover, the most precious thing in the apocalypse was food. It was even said that you could covet other people's women, but you couldn't covet other people's food. In the apocalypse, wives and children could be exchanged for food. Thus, it could be seen how important food was. Especially those paranormals, each of them had a strange temper. Maybe they would cause trouble if they looked at other people's food. Now, this group of refugees were all homeless. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were stray dogs. How dare they cause trouble? Although Xiao Qing didn't know what they were thinking, she was working hard to make the fire bigger. Her son must be hungry. She had to make the meal quickly. Then, the meal would be ready. As soon as the pot was opened, the fragrance immediately drifted out. Not to mention that these refugees were running for their lives, even in normal times, they had never smelled such a fragrance before. It was the apocalypse, and they couldn't even fill their stomachs. How could they want to eat meat? Everyone tried to stretch their noses, as if they could breathe in the fragrance of the meat into their stomachs. When some people looked at the pot in Xiao Qing's hand, their eyes turned green, like hungry wolves. Xiao Qing called Yan Qiue over to taste it. It was ready, so she carried the food into the tent. She couldn't let the refugees see Xiao Hua and the others, otherwise, they would be scared to death. Chapter 492. It was difficult for the refugees to fill their stomachs, let alone eat meat. They gnawed on the dry food in their hands, and then raised their noses and eyes to catch the aroma in the air. They looked at Xiao Qing's meat dishes. The charming woman looked at the hardtack in her hand, and then looked at the food in Xiao Qing's hand. She said coquettishly, "Run, brother Yao, I want to eat meat too." The two men looked at each other. They really did not dare to leave the group to hunt. Otherwise, mutant animals and zombies would jump out of nowhere and eat them like desserts. After the apocalypse, there was no safe place in the wild. Unless one was strong, like Xiao Qing, the survival rate in the wild was very low. The two men looked at the charming woman with a troubled expression. The woman's face changed, and she snorted, "If I follow you two brothers, I won't even be able to eat meat. What am I after?" The two men hurriedly comforted the woman. The one called Brother Yao gave Run a look. The two men gathered together and discussed. Soon, Run walked toward Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing was putting the leftovers in the pot on a plate when she saw a burly man coming over. He said, "Sister, can we make a deal? I'll give you some nuclei to buy the food you order. Is that okay?" Xiao Qing had cooked a lot, and the few of them would not be able to finish it. Besides, helping others was also helping oneself. Who didn't ask for help? She nodded and took out a new plate, and gave some to the burly man. The burly man pointed at the nuclei in his hand and gave them to Xiao Qing. He and Brother Yao had saved these nuclei for a few months. They were going to add some new things when they settled down in the new base. Now, it was just a plate of food. Xiao Qing was quite generous, and gave him a plate full of food. Run thanked her and took the plate away. Xiao Qing cooked the porridge on a small fire, and opened another pot. There was rice in the pot, and it was already cooked. She scooped more rice and carried it into the tent. After our Run brought the dishes back, the woman immediately picked up a piece of meat with her hand. The meat was delicious. She smacked her fingers and tugged at our Run's sleeve. "Why is it chicken? I want to eat braised rabbit head." "They only have one rabbit head. They definitely won't sell it," Run said with a headache. The woman was immediately displeased. She glared at them and said, "Brother Yao, Run, I've suffered a lot ever since I followed you two brothers. I want to eat a braised rabbit head now. You Brother Yao quickly said, okay, okay, okay. I'll think of something. In the post-apocalyptic world, the number of women had decreased drastically. For people like them, it was already considered lucky for their brothers to marry the same wife. Most of them were unable to find a girlfriend. His wife should be doted on. The chicken had already been moved, and he couldn't bring it back to let others exchange it. He touched his pocket and found the only crystal core left. He walked over. Xiao Qing just happened to come out of the tent because the chicken soup was ready at this time. Then, he saw another burly man coming over. Brother Yao was a little embarrassed as he grabbed a handful of nuclei and said, "It's like this. Can I exchange the braised rabbit head with you?" The burly man, who was more than 1.8 meters tall, blushed because of embarrassment. Xiao Qing suddenly thought of Yan Hanqing. When he was shy, his ears would turn red, and then it would spread to his cheeks. He was so cute. Xiao Qing quickly threw the thought out of her mind and nodded. Okay. Anyway, no one in her family ate a rabbit head. Otherwise, Yaya would be rolling on the ground. Brother Yao thanked her gratefully and went back with the rabbit head. Chapter 493. Xiao Qing took out the whole chicken from the pot. She opened the belly of the chicken and took out all the mushrooms mixed with the soup. This part was the most delicious. She added some chicken soup and scooped a bowl of it. She planned to serve it to the few in the tent later. Then, she tore the whole chicken into strips, threw it back into the pot, and extinguished the fire. After a while, it was ready to be eaten. The woman was jealous again. Ever since Dai and Yan Chiue came over, her eyes had not returned to normal. Why? They were both women, and her looks were not inferior to Xiao Qing's. Xiao Qing had 2 handsome men accompanying her, and those 2 men were very outstanding. They could hunt prey, while she only had 2 burly men who were not very capable. She looked at Xiao Qing and then looked at her. She had always been the one envied by others. She should be the one envied by others. But now, she could only envy others. Why? Jealousy had made the woman lose her mind. She looked at Xiao Qing not far away and gritted her teeth. She deliberately shouted, "I want to drink chicken soup again." Run and Brother Yao were really out of ideas. They had spent most of the crystal nuclei they had saved. They had to keep some for future preparations. If something happened in the future, they would not be penniless. "Jiao, we don't have any more crystal nuclei." Run said helplessly. The woman's eyes turned red. She kept hitting Run. "Why did I follow you 2 useless people? You can't even drink a bowl of chicken soup." "I don't care. If you don't get it for me, I'll get it myself." "Jiao, Jiao." Brother Yao shouted a few times, but he could not stop her. He hurried forward to pull her back. But the woman ran fast. At this moment, she was already in front of Xiao Qing's tent. She lifted the curtain of the tent. Before she could say anything, she saw an infant zombie turn its head from Dai's neck and stare at her with a pair of black eyes. She was stunned. She immediately screamed and scrambled backward. Xiao Qing felt the veins on her forehead throbbing. When she was outside, she really didn't like trouble. When she encountered similar situations, if she could resolve it peacefully, she wouldn't mind letting others take advantage of her. Take the previous matter for example. Making things convenient for others was also making things convenient for oneself. However, when others came looking for her, she would not run away. Not liking trouble did not mean that she was afraid of it. On the contrary, she had been afraid of many things in her life, but she had never been afraid of trouble. The woman hurriedly ran out and grabbed Brother Yao's sleeve, then yelled with a frightened face, "There's a zombie in there." "No. That woman must be the same. They are all zombies." The woman's voice was very loud. The refugees who were eating also became vigilant and each of them picked up simple weapons. Some of them were holding farming tools, some were holding steel pipes, some were holding kitchen knives, and some were holding wooden sticks. They were already frightened. Once they heard the word zombie, they would run away in fear. Xiao Qing lifted the curtain of the tent. Her eyes were full of tenderness. She looked at the woman and smiled. Zombie? Where is it? The woman was scared and shrank into Brother Yao's arms. She pointed behind Xiao Qing and yelled, I saw it. An infant zombie. It's lying on that man's back. Xiao Qing had a smile on her face, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Miss, are you so hungry that you're hallucinating? A zombie lying on a man's back. You've read too many ghost stories. You'd better go eat. Run and Brother Yao had interacted with Xiao Qing before. They felt that she was a good person, but they also felt that the woman was too unreasonable today. They tried to persuade her, yeah, Jiao, go eat. The food is getting cold. The woman pushed Run away and yelled, there's really a zombie in there. Why would I lie to you? I saw it with my own eyes. As she spoke, she looked into Xiao Qing's cold eyes. She shivered and her voice weakened. Xiao Qing said to the two men, you two keep an eye on your partners. My wife, child, and I are going to eat. Run and Brother Yao hurried to apologize. They blushed and said, Jiao is not like this usually. We're really sorry. We're sorry to disturb you. The woman felt so wronged. She rushed over and tried to pull the curtain of the tent open, but Run and Brother Yao stopped her. If it were a normal day, she might just pretend that she didn't see it. Even if Jiao Qing was raising zombies, it was none of her business. However, she was blinded by jealousy today. All she could think of was to expose Xiao Qing's true face. It would be best if she could incite everyone to kill her. At that time, she broke away from Run and Brother Yao. The two men didn't want to use too much strength as they were afraid that they would hurt her. When she rushed over, Xiao Qing didn't stop her. If someone wanted to die, why would she stop her? The woman pulled down the curtain of the tent and said to the refugees, everyone, look. I'm not lying to you. There's a zombie in her tent. Dummy Air walked out. He deliberately turned his eyes into a scarlet color. Xiao Yu, who was lying on his neck, also stuck her head out. Xiao Hua was biting her finger. She smiled and showed her fangs. Little Bun, who had one black eye and one normal eye, immediately frightened the refugees. They almost knelt on the ground. Xiao Qing leaned against Er Dai's chest. She stretched out her grayish-black nails and lifted Er Dai's chin. She looked at the woman lazily and said, what does it have to do with you whether it's a human or a zombie in my house? If you meddle in other people's business, your tongue will rot. Yan Chiyue was holding a bowl of chicken soup. She stretched her head lazily and said, sweetheart, come and eat after you're done. The power of jealousy was really scary. It made the woman overcome her fear. She incited everyone and said, look, they're zombies. Their whole family is zombies. Let's go and kill them together. No one moved. The refugees were still rational. People like Xiao Qing and the others didn't look like zombies except for a few places. At first glance, they knew that they were high-level zombies. How could they afford to offend them? Some of them even secretly scolded the woman for being a busybody. Xiao Qing and the others were hiding their identities. At first glance, they knew that they weren't going to do anything to the refugees. Why couldn't they just get along peacefully? They didn't have any powerful superpowered people in their group. How could they fight against Xiao Qing and the others? However, if they were exposed, would Xiao Qing continue to be peaceful? The woman was still instigating them. What are you afraid of? We have more people. There's strength in numbers. How many zombies do they have? Don't be afraid. Let's go together and kill them. Chapter 494. Xiao Qing had become hot-tempered since the apocalypse, but she didn't want to kill people in front of her children. However, the woman in front of her had incited others to kill them. She couldn't tolerate it. Run and Brother Yao were smart. They quickly covered the woman's mouth when they saw Xiao Qing's expression change. They were embarrassed and wanted to apologize, but they didn't know what to say. The woman stepped on Run's foot, but Run gritted his teeth and didn't let go. Xiao Qing saw the pleading in Run's eyes. Finally, she chose to let the woman go. However, Xiao Qing still planted a daughter in the woman's body. If she did it again and again and still didn't change, Xiao Qing didn't mind killing her. In any case, Xiao Qing lacked everything except human lives. Take care of your woman. Xiao Qing put down the curtain slowly. Although I don't want to interfere with you, I won't tolerate it if you really annoy me. Brother Yao nodded and dragged the woman back. Xiao Qing entered the tent. She could still hear the woman's angry voice from afar. The woman had been spoiled to the point that she didn't even know what she was doing. If she continued like this, she would bring trouble to the two men. Xiao Qing was in a good mood today, so she didn't care about it. What if the woman offended another powerful man? This was the end of the world, a world where one could get used to stepping on bones. This chicken soup is good. Do you want to drink more? Yan Qiue scooped a small bowl of chicken soup and handed it to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing took it and fed it to Little Bun first. Little Fish and Little Flower were stretching their heads. They hadn't eaten such normal food since they became zombies. The two of them were very curious. Especially Little Flower. She was afraid of Xiao Qing at first because she had been beaten by Xiao Qing before. She almost lost her life. Later, she found that as long as she didn't do anything bad to Xiao Qing and Little Bun, Xiao Qing wouldn't beat her. She became bolder. For example, now she dared to ask for food in front of Xiao Qing. The two zombies that would scare people out of their wits were now lying on the edge of the table, waiting to be fed. They even looked a little cute. When the woman outside finally stopped, Xiao Qing had made the quilt and was ready to sleep. The next morning, when Xiao Qing got up, the group of refugees was nowhere to be seen. They probably ran away early in the morning. Being able to rest so close to Xiao Qing for a night had exhausted all their courage. Even though they knew that Xiao Qing wouldn't sneak in and eat them in the middle of the night, they were still scared and didn't dare to sleep. Xiao Qing didn't mind. She packed up her things and led her family in a random direction. Then, they started moving. She really didn't have a specific goal. She used looking for mutated plants as an excuse to travel. Of course, the most important thing was to avoid Yan Hanqing. If the zombies hadn't sneaked into the human base, she could have taken her family to a base and strolled around the market. Now, she had to stay as far away from the crowd as possible. After all, other than Yan Qiue, everyone in their nest was a zombie. People's luck was really important. After walking for a day, they just found a suitable place to set up camp. Xiao Qing heard someone call her, Sister Qing. Xiao Qing turned around and saw a familiar person pushing aside the grass. Her face was covered in dirt, but she still had a surprised expression. Then, a huge bear head popped out and looked at Xiao Qing blankly. Chapter 495. Qin Zishi. Xiao Qing was stunned for a moment, then she pulled him out and asked, "Why are you here?" "Sister Qing, long time no see. How have you been?" Qin Zishi was very enthusiastic. He didn't mind that Xiao Qing's identity as a zombie had been exposed at all. "We're going to the west coast." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Here's the thing. Several countries in the earthquake zone have had serious earthquakes. Many high-level zombies have crossed the sea and come here. The higher-ups have sent people to form a team of superpowered people to patrol the coast and kill the zombies that come ashore. We're going to the coast." Xiao Qing nodded, then said, "I'm fine. Don't worry. Is the situation on the coast serious? Qin Zishi frowned, then said, the zombies that can cross the sea are not weak. There have been several level 5 zombies. At first, the casualties were quite serious, but now that we're prepared, it's much better. Xiao Qing asked, where are your teammates? They're all behind us. I'm here to explore. Qin Zishi touched Xiong Da's head, then said, I didn't expect to meet you. It's fate. Xiao Qing hesitated for a moment, then pointed to her tent and said, I've brought a few companions with me this time. They're not human. If your teammates know about it, I'm afraid there will be a conflict, so I can't invite you to dinner. If you don't mind, you can come alone. Qin Zishi nodded, then said, I'll ask my teammates to set up camp nearby. It's not too far away and we can take care of each other. I'll also restrain them from spying on us. Sister Qing, leave me a portion of dinner. I'll come over after I set up camp with my teammates. Okay. Xiao Qing touched Qin Zishi's soft hair and touched Xiong Da's head, then urged him, go ahead, I'll be ready soon. Qin Zishi took Xiong Da back. After a while, a group of people began to set up camp not far from where Xiao Qing and the others were. Xiao Qing stood on her tiptoes to take a look. There were some familiar faces inside. Zhu Mochen was also present, so she calmly made an extra portion of rice. Very quickly, Qin Zishi brought Zhu Mochen over. Xiao Qing invited the two of them to come in and eat. When the two of them walked in, they were given a fright. Xiao Hua and Xiao Yu tilted their heads and stared at them with the same expression. Their eyes were so dark that they looked a little scary at first glance. Most of the people present were acquaintances, so the two of them were not afraid. They squeezed together with Dai and the others at the table and waited for dinner. While eating, Qin Zishi told Xiao Qing about the current situation in detail. Unlike the Celestial Empire, almost every household in America had guns. Therefore, in the early days of the apocalypse, the casualties there were much better than in the Celestial Empire. However, in the early days, there was a lot of conflict between superpowered people and ordinary people. In the early days, superpowered people were no match for guns. Many superpowered people died under the muzzle of guns after they clashed with ordinary people. In addition, the population there was not as high as in the Celestial Empire. The number of superpowered people was originally very small. In the middle and later period, when the zombies evolved to a certain extent, guns were useless. When superpowered people became the main force, the Celestial Empire realized that there were too few superpowered people. Therefore, the zombies there did not have superpowered people as their natural enemy, so they evolved very quickly. As far as they knew, some of the zombies that had crossed the sea had already come ashore. After all, when they first discovered the situation, many zombies had already arrived. There might be level 6 or level 7 zombies among them. The situation was not very good. Moreover, the zombies were still coming ashore in a steady stream. The capital had organized a lot of manpower, but the zombie tide here was also surging. If all the superpowered people were transferred to deal with the zombies that came across the sea, what would happen here? After all, there was not enough manpower. They could take care of this side, but they could not take care of the other side. Speaking of this, Qin Zishi also had a headache. In fact, we were not so short of manpower before, but when we cleaned up the zombies that came ashore, we lost many superpowered people. After all, most of the superpowered people are still at level 3. Level 4 is the high-end combat power, and there are only a few at level 5. The zombies that can cross the sea are all at level 4. Xiao Qing asked calmly, can you control them? For the time being, yes. Qin Zishi rubbed his head and said, if there is another zombie tide in the capital, we can't control this side. Xiao Qing was also aware of this. It could only be said that misfortunes never came alone. If the situation was really bad, she would not stand by and watch. After all, this was the country where she was born and raised. She could not be bullied by a group of foreign zombies. However, the people under her command were all zombies. If they were transferred to help, she was afraid that the people in the capital would raise their muzzles first. Xiao Qing did not want to be attacked from the front and the back. This matter needed to be considered in the long run. Anyway, the current situation was still under control. She was not in a hurry. She could follow them to see the situation and then decide what to do next. The only problem was that the zombies around her were too eye-catching, which was also a problem. At this point, Qin Zishi patted her chest and said, "Don't worry about that. Most of the team members I brought this time are from the Qin family's guards. Even if they find out about your identities, they won't make a fuss. Okay, I'll go with you to see the situation." Xiao Qing did not tell him her plan, but Qin Zishi was already very excited. Whether Xiao Qing was a human or a zombie, she was his friend and a master. If she was willing to go with them, she would definitely help. If Xiao Qing was willing to help, the casualties of his team would be greatly reduced, which was a good thing. As such, before they even finished eating, Qin Zishi was already anxious to go back and inform his team. In the end, he was stopped by Xiao Qing. "Let's finish eating first." Then, he and Zhu Machen were both given a large bowl of rice by Xiao Qing. After eating, he could not wait to go back and do some work for his team. Actually, there were only two things he wanted to say. First, there would be people going with them soon. Second, they should not be curious. Second, they should not casually investigate their identities. Then, even if they discovered something, they should pretend that they did not know or see anything. At that time, some of the team members started to jeer, "Boss, did you find us a sister-in-law? Why are you acting so mysterious?" Qin Zishi's face turned red and he became angry. "Didn't I tell you not to ask so many questions?" Chapter 496. The more bashful Qin Zishi was, the more certain they were that their guess was correct. They kicked up a fuss and insisted that Qin Zishi bring the girl out for a look. The more people there were, the harder it was to stop. Qin Zishi's face was as red as blood. It was not because he was exposed, but because he kept thinking about how Little Bun had drugged him and tried to make him Little Bun's stepfather. Thinking about how Xiao Qing was called his wife, he could not help but blush and feel shy. "Don't talk nonsense. It won't be good if others hear it. She already has a child." Qin Zishi gritted his teeth. Someone immediately whistled. "So it's really a girl? She already has a child. Boss, aren't you going to take responsibility? Aren't you too much of a scumbag?" Qin Zishi was dumbfounded. He could not explain himself clearly. He stammered, "The child is not mine." Another team member added. He sighed and said, "Boss, I'm not trying to nag you. Although big sister-in-law had a child, since something has already happened between you two, you should take responsibility. You shouldn't be so irresponsible just because of big sister-in-law's past. Boss, you're still young and don't understand. It's better for women to be mature and know how to dote on others." They started to laugh again. One after another, they teased Qin Zishi. Qin Zishi was about to dig a hole in the ground, but he still could not retort. At this moment, Xiao Qing walked over. She did not understand the situation and waved at Qin Zishi. Qin Zishi hurriedly ran over under the teasing gazes of the group. His face was still red as he said, "Sister Qing, why are you here?" "I'm here to give you something. You probably didn't get to eat such fresh fruit after rushing all the way here. I brought more, so I'll give you some. Take it back and share it with your brothers. They're all your team members. You have to feel sorry for them." Xiao Qing smiled and stuffed a bag into his hands. Then she said, "I'm not teaching you how to win people's hearts. It's just that most creatures like humans put themselves in other people's shoes. If you treat them well, they will naturally treat you well. This kind of kindness is not intentional. It's accumulated over time. I understand, Sister Qing. Qin Zishi nodded seriously, and the redness on her face gradually faded. After they finished talking about business, Xiao Qing couldn't help but ask, "What were you talking about just now? I saw that your face was red." At the mention of this, Qin Zishi blushed again and stammered, "Nothing much, just some men's topics." Xiao Qing had always regarded him as a younger brother. Hearing his words, she sneered and touched his head. "You've grown up. You're a man now. Let's not talk about it. You should go back." "I'm going back to take care of the children." "Yes." Qin Zishi pursed her lips and looked at Xiao Qing's back. She suddenly felt that, being with Xiao Qing might not be so bad after all. Xiao Qing was a very good woman. When he thought of this, his cheeks inexplicably burned. Many things flashed through his mind, including Xiao Qing's smile, Xiao Qing's gentle eyes, Xiao Qing touching his head, and Xiao Qing, who was like a god of death. At that time, he even felt that Dai was so happy. Even if he became a zombie, there were still people who were willing to go against the whole world for him. Patting his cheeks and throwing away all the messy thoughts in his mind, Qin Zishi walked back with the fruit. His group of team members swarmed over, and one by one, they exclaimed in a tone of admiration, "God, sister-in-law is so beautiful." "That's right, such a charming, beautiful woman. She doesn't look like she has given birth at all. How did she fall in love with you, boss? Does sister-in-law like Xingtai?" Chapter 497. I'm so jealous of you, boss. My God, I haven't seen such a beautiful woman in a long time. After the apocalypse, most women would look haggard due to lack of nutrition, going through all kinds of hardships, and not having any cosmetics. Women like Xiao Qing were rare. Hearing their words, Qin Zishi felt inexplicably unhappy. He felt as if the precious treasures he possessed were being coveted by others. He deliberately tightened his face and took out the fruits that Xiao Qing had brought. Don't talk too much. Fruits were precious in the apocalypse. Ordinary people couldn't afford them. Some of them shut their mouths, and some muttered, "Sister-in-law is so nice. Boss, you're so lucky." Qin Zishi distributed the fruits and said seriously, "It's all because of sister-in-law. Don't talk nonsense. It won't be good if she hears." The team members immediately said nervously, "Boss, you haven't won her yet. She's such a good and generous girl. Hurry up and chase her. You'll regret it if you miss her." "Yeah, I think sister-in-law will have many admirers. There will be a lot of excellent men. Boss, you should be careful. Yeah, what if someone gets to her first?" Qin Zishi still looked serious and dignified. "Eat your food. Put it down if you don't want to eat. Why are you so talkative?" The group of people hurriedly stopped talking and obediently ate their fruits. The next day, Qin Zishi said that he had invited Xiao Qing to travel with him. His team members were very welcoming. Firstly, it was a good thing to be able to see such a beautiful woman every day. Secondly, they hoped that Qin Zishi could cultivate a relationship with Xiao Qing and win her over when they traveled together. So, of course, they agreed happily. Qin Zishi also said that he hoped that they wouldn't investigate the people around Xiao Qing. No matter how strange they were, his team members still agreed. What a joke. If Qin Zishi broke up with Xiao Qing because of them, it would be a great loss. After Xiao Qing finished packing, she came over. The little bun was easier to deal with. Except for one strange eye, he didn't look like a zombie. After Little Flower reached level 5, he also had a special ability. He could disguise his eye color and other special parts. Other than not being able to speak, he looked quite normal. The most abnormal one was probably Xiaoyu. No matter how hard he tried to disguise himself, no one could tell that something was wrong. Xiao Qin was having a headache. Fortunately, Xiao Yu was also a high-level zombie. Even if she acted alone, she would not be in any danger. Therefore, after discussing with them, Xiao Qin asked Xiao Yu to hide nearby and follow them. Then, Xiao Qin held her son's hand in her left hand and her child bride's hand in her right. Two men followed behind her as they entered Qin Zixi team. The group of people slowly walked towards the beach. Then, all of Qin Zixi's team members treated Xiao Qin very well for no reason. They even praised Qin Zixi in all kinds of vague words. They almost praised Qin Zixi to the heavens. Not to mention the others, even Qin Zixi himself was embarrassed. Xiao Qin was confused. What were they doing? Qin Zixi had an indescribable feeling of awkwardness and grievance. He could not say anything, especially when some people secretly told him to be careful. The two men behind Xiao Qin were not inferior to him in terms of looks. They told him not to let them get the upper hand. The group of people walked like this. Xiao Qin used a day's time to conquer everyone's stomachs with her cooking skills. Chapter 498. The first time they ate Xiao Qin's cooking, Qin Zixi's entire team, except for Zhu Machin who had already eaten, were all in awe. It was said that at night, the entire team lined up to hug Qin Zixi's thigh, telling him that he had to win over Xiao Qin no matter what. They all acknowledged this sister-in-law. After the apocalypse, they had never eaten such good food again. If Qin Zixi could win over Xiao Qin, didn't that mean that they could eat as good as today every day? That would be a heavenly life. Xiao Qin didn't know about this. She and Dai picked a lot of wild fruits and gave them to Yan Qiue to identify. The poisonous ones were thrown away and the non-poisonous ones were left to eat. Tasting all kinds of fruits was also a kind of joy, especially when you were with the person you liked. The fruits were sour and sweet. When Yan Qiue tasted something sweet, he would silently take out a special medicinal powder and apply it on it, then give it to Xiao Qin. After applying the medicinal powder, Xiao Qin could taste the fruits and wouldn't vomit. When he tasted something sour, he would silently eat it. If he really couldn't eat it, he would spit it out or give it to Dai. After becoming a zombie, Dai stuck his tongue out for the first time. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have much water in his body, he probably would have cried. Xiao Qin could only helplessly pat Dai's head in response to Yan Qiue's bad intentions. Dai rubbed against Xiao Qin's hand, feeling wronged. The next time Yan Qiue gave him a fruit, he would stupidly swallow it. The team members at the side gritted their teeth. They felt that their team leader was too useless. If this continued, someone else would beat them to it sooner or later. But even if the emperor wasn't worried, it was useless for the eunuchs to be worried. As a result, they became more and more attentive. During the lunch break, there would often be team members who would pick bunches of wild flowers or clear and sweet stream water to give to Xiao Qin. When they did, they would all say, "Team leader told us to give it to you." For example, every time they stopped to rest, they would clean up a place for Xiao Qin, lay a soft cloth on the floor, and let her sit down to rest. These small tasks were all fought over by a group of people. They were determined to let Xiao Qin feel how good it was to be treated as their sister-in-law. Qin Zixi was so embarrassed that she wanted to crawl into the ground and not come out. Xiao Qin only thought that Qin Zixi and the other team members were being enthusiastic, so she didn't think much of it. When she received the flowers, she said with a smile, "I'll give you an extra lunch for lunch." At noon, the wild boar that Dai had hunted came back. The huge mountain of meat became their lunch. They fried, boiled, roasted, and ate it in more than 10 ways. Everyone ate until their mouths were dripping with oil. Some people had tears in their eyes. Since the apocalypse, they had not eaten meat so happily. This feeling of eating meat until they were full was really good. They still wanted to eat meat like this, so they put their hopes on Qin Zishi. Qin Zishi, who was stared at by everyone with hopeful eyes, thought, damn it. Xiao Qin didn't understand, but Yan Qiue understood a lot. When they went to bed at night, he hugged Xiao Qin and snorted, flirting with flowers and grass, attracting bees and butterflies. Tell me, how many more are there? Xiao Qin was stupefied. Are you talking about me? Yan Qiue was very sad, but when he thought about it, he was a little happy. It was good that Xiao Qin didn't understand. If she didn't understand, she wouldn't respond. Although Xiao Qin was a little lazy, she was swift and decisive in many aspects, whether it was making decisions or taking actions. However, she was particularly slow in one aspect. That was the emotional aspect. She was like a snail, shrinking into its shell. You could either force the shell open or crawl in and wait for her to understand by herself. Maybe in the next life. Therefore, men like Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan deserved to wait their whole lives for no response. Yan Hanqing, who had no idea that Yan Hanqing had already forced himself to confess, sneered and thought to himself. There were two types of men that he was least afraid of. One was like Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan, who didn't know how to express themselves and only acted without saying anything. They were extremely silent. The other was like Qin Zishi, who was shy and couldn't say anything. There was no competition between these two types of men, so he wasn't afraid at all. The scary ones were people like him and Dai, who were unconscious and clingy. It was said that blessings didn't come in pairs, and misfortune didn't come singly. Yan Qiue had just found a potential love rival, and the next day, he encountered something that made him even more sullen. They packed up and were about to continue walking when a group of familiar faces appeared in front of them. It seemed like they had met on the same road. Qin Zishi's team members quickly became alert. After all, they were in the wilderness, and no one knew what kind of people they would meet. Xiao Qin was helpless. She covered her face. She wanted to be a good person, but the heavens didn't let her. The people who had come were none other than the group of refugees that had separated from them not long ago. As expected, enemies often crossed paths. Chapter 499. The woman's eyes lit up. She hadn't given up yet. Run was ready to retreat as soon as he saw Xiao Qin. He wanted to protect Jiao, but Jiao wouldn't cooperate with him. She looked left and right, probably trying to see if Qin Zishi and Xiao Qin were in cahoots. After all, when they left, there weren't so many people around Xiao Qin, which meant that these people met Xiao Qin after they left. The baby zombie wasn't there, and the others were disguised as human beings. Maybe they didn't know the identities of Xiao Qin and the others. After all, who would be willing to travel with a group of zombies? Jiao felt that her chance had come. There were no powerful people in this group of refugees, so they didn't dare to fight against Xiao Qin. However, Qin Zishi and the others were all high-leveled superpowered people. They could definitely defeat Xiao Qin and the others. Thinking of that, Jiao's smile became more charming and sinister. She stepped forward and said in a strange voice, "Hey, we meet again." Xiao Qin glanced at her coldly. Except for Run and Yao, the rest of the refugees couldn't help but step back. And then? What do you want to tell me? Xiao Qin asked lightly. The woman's face was distorted. She pointed at Xiao Qin and said to Qin Zishi and the others, "You must not know that this woman and the people behind her are all zombies. I saw it with my own eyes." Qin Zishi's face changed immediately. He couldn't help but look at Jiao with a murderous look. He knew that although he didn't care about Xiao Qin's identity, it didn't mean that everyone else didn't care. This woman actually told Xiao Qin's secret so casually. She must be up to no good. He sneered and said, "If Sister Qin was a zombie and you saw her, you wouldn't be able to live until now." Jiao was stunned, and the others echoed, "That's right. Is there something wrong with your brain?" Whoever you say is a zombie is a zombie. That's right. Do we know you? They just casually rushed up and pointed at us. Ahem, they said they were zombies. I think you're the one with bad intentions. If Sister Qing is really a zombie, do you think she would let you leave alive? Ah Jiao panicked and explained, those people behind me all saw it. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. It's because there are so many of us that she didn't dare to kill us. Run, Brother Yao, tell me. She turned around and said with a ferocious expression. Some of the refugees wanted to say something, but they saw Little Flower turn his head and give them a strange smile. His sharp fangs shone with a cold light, as if they could easily tear their flesh and bones apart. Those who wanted to speak immediately shivered and lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Run tugged at Jiao's sleeve and said awkwardly, I'm sorry. She's been acting weird these days. She's probably hallucinating because of the zombies. She's been calling everyone a zombie. A Jiao slapped Run's face and said angrily, why did I follow a useless man like you? He didn't even dare to speak the truth. Brother Yao, tell me. Stop it, Jiao. Brother Yao pulled Run over and was stunned. He should love his wife, but they weren't married yet. He couldn't risk his brother's life for a woman, especially one who didn't know what was good for her. How long are you going to make a scene? I'm making a scene. Ah Jiao was so angry that her chest trembled. She turned around and looked at the refugees. A bunch of cowards. Cowards. You all know she's a zombie. The people behind her are also zombies. Why don't you dare to say it? Is it because she's strong and you're afraid of revenge? We have so many people. Ah Jiao instigated. She looked like some evil cult. Chapter 500. Xiao Qin smiled faintly and asked Qin Zishi, what do you want to eat tonight? Qin Zishi thought for a while and said, we'll eat whatever you cook. As for this woman, you don't need to worry about her. I'll deal with her for you. Xiao Qin didn't say anything more. She walked over with Dai and the others. When she passed by A Jiao, she gave her a smile, which made A Jiao so angry that she almost died. Qin Zishi gave the people around her a look. Immediately, two people came forward and dragged A Jiao away. A Jiao struggled and said, zombies don't have temperature or blood. Do you dare to prove yourself? Yan Qiue, who had already walked a distance away, calmly bit her finger. The bright blood fell on her red lips, which looked very charming. A Jiao still wanted to say something, but Qin Zishi's team members had already covered her mouth and dragged her away. Her eyes were full of fear and despair. At this moment, she realized that it would not end well to go against some people. For example, Xiao Qing. Run and Yao both knew that they would kill A Jiao. Their eyes were full of reluctance and helplessness, especially Run. He tried to chase after A Jiao, but was stopped by Yao. He couldn't let Run die for such a woman. Speaking of which, they had already done their best. They treated A Jiao very well in daily life. It could be said that they would grant her every request. However, A Jiao was spoiled, capricious, and easily lost her temper. Not only that, but she also almost dragged everyone to death because of her jealousy. They didn't want such a woman. When A Jiao was killed, Xiao Qing silently controlled the daughter and crushed A Jiao's heart. She had to make sure that A Jiao was dead. Only when the threat was completely eliminated could she be at ease. They went out to find a lot of food and came back. When they came back, they saw the group of refugees sitting there stiffly. They didn't dare to leave. They were afraid that Xiao Qing would be dissatisfied and kill them all. Xiao Qing didn't care about them. She stewed a big pot of rice and fried a dozen dishes. The group of people gathered together to eat. As they ate, one of the team members said, "That woman is really crazy. Look at Sister Qing. Who has ever seen a zombie that can talk, is so beautiful, can cook, and can eat normal food. Xiao Qing smiled and said softly, "Brat, you're still praising me in a roundabout way. Your mouth is quite sweet." That team member hurriedly said, "Then you have to bribe Sister Qing. If you have a sister as beautiful as you, no, half as beautiful as you, remember to introduce her to me. You think you can buy me over with just one or two sweet words?" Xiao Qing said lazily, "Am I that cheap? That won't do." That team member said seriously, "I'll give you my captain. That's enough, right? Sister Qing, just give me a girl when the time comes." Xiao Qing smiled and lay in Dai's arms. She almost rolled. She stretched out her arm and Yan Qiue reached out to pull her. Xiao Qing pinched Yan Qiue's finger. There was still a trace of blood on the scabbed wound. She stuck out her pink tongue and licked it. Then she said lazily, "See? These two are both mine. Don't say such things. Otherwise, my two will be jealous." Qin Zishi pinched his chopsticks. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a little sad. He bit his lower lip and smiled. "Sister Qing, when did you get together with brother Yu? Why didn't you invite me to the wedding? We're not married yet. After a few days, when things calm down, maybe I'll hold a wedding and marry both of them." Xiao Qing said with a smile. Chapter 501. She hadn't sensed Qin Zishi's feelings before. After all, Qin Zishi was old. It was too much for an old cow to eat young grass. She still had some integrity. Until just now, when the team member brought it up, she vaguely sensed it. Her intuition made her immediately mention the two at home to put an end to all their thoughts. How should she put it? She felt that Qin Zishi had a good impression of her at most. After all, Qin Zishi was at the age where love was first awakened. It was easy for him to have a kind of infatuation with a mature and attractive woman like her. Therefore, it was better to deal with the pain quickly. It was better to let him give up. They were suitable to be brother and sister, not lovers. When the time comes, I will definitely give Sister Qing a big red packet. Qin Zishi curled his lips, but it made people feel that he was actually not happy. The few team members who were laughing and joking just now were instantly silenced. Especially the one who was joking with Xiao Qing. He was directly dumbfounded. He was prepared to help his boss, but in the end, sob, it was different from what he thought. He would definitely be beaten tonight. Okay, let's eat first. I will definitely inform you when the time comes. Xiao Qing didn't want to talk about this anymore. Because she knew that Yan Qiue wanted to marry her very much, but she kept delaying the time because of Dai. This was very unfair to Yan Qiue. If Yan Qiue didn't talk about it, she didn't want to talk about it and make Yan Qiue unhappy. The group of refugees ate with fear, let alone sleep. The next day, when Xiao Qing lazily got up to wash up, she found the group of refugees huddled together and sleeping under a tree. There was dew on their eyebrows and temples, and they looked very pitiful. When Xiao Qing walked over, they sat up vigilantly, each more alert than the other. Xiao Qing asked Brother Yao, because he seemed to be more rational, "Where are you going?" "We are going to find a bigger base to settle down. We found a few, but they all refused to accept us. So we are going to the capital," Brother Yao said honestly. Because of the zombies that had sneaked in before, those bases had become like birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bow. They would rather not add new people than accept outsiders. Xiao Qing nodded with some regret. If they were going to pass by Jiangqing City, she wanted to entrust Xiaoyu to them so that they could help send her back. However, thinking about it, it was impossible. These people were so timid. If he asked them to send Xiaoyu, they would probably be scared to death. After giving up on this tempting idea, Xiao Qing went to the bushes. Xiaoyu hugged the tree trunk and spat out bubbles as he slept. He really looked like a small fish. After feeding Xiaoyu some food, Lin Yiqian patted his head and comforted him. She then returned to her room with her toiletries. Once again, they parted ways with this group of refugees. They ran faster than anyone else, probably because they were afraid that Xiaoqing would regret her decision and want to keep them here to silence them. Xiaoqing was really too lazy to move them. Although zombies were inconvenient in many ways, there were also benefits. For example, zombies wouldn't feel uncomfortable for a few days every month. Relatives like menstruation would definitely not come. In the past, Xiaoqing had been in all kinds of environments to carry out missions. She used to lie in the bushes that were covered with cold rainwater for an entire day. She used to hide in the river during winter. Most of the time, she was in the wild and had to drink cold water. Every time her menstruation came, it would be very painful. Chapter 502. After becoming a zombie, saying goodbye to her period had become a privilege. However, her habit made her feel warm every few days, and she even wanted to be carried away. Especially after being exposed in front of Qin Zishi and the others, Xiaoqing threw caution to the wind. Dai carried her on his back and Yan Qiue held her in his arms. Even little Bun was biting his fingers. Wasn't this how he should be treated? In the end, Xiongde replaced Dai and Yan Qiue. Xiongde became Xiaoqing's exclusive mount. He carried Xiaoqing on his back and had little Bun and Xiaohua on his head. Other than encountering those refugees, they didn't encounter anything special. However, they still saw many refugees fleeing in all directions, dragging their families with them as they tried to find a place to stay. The apocalypse had just settled down, but now it was chaotic again. Xiaoqing was a little tired. If she had a choice, she really wanted to stay in Jiang City and not go anywhere else. She wanted to see her children, tease her lover, and spend time with her friends. However, what did people live for? Others didn't know, but Xiaoqing knew that in addition to the safety of her family, she only had one wish, which was to live with a clear conscience. That was enough. Her conscience didn't allow her to see such a tragic scene. Otherwise, she wouldn't have intervened. To put it bluntly, if the whole world was destroyed and only a few of them were left, what was the point of living? Soon, they arrived at their destination, the West Coast. From afar, they could see many paranormals forming teams of about 10 people patrolling along the coast. Once they found zombies coming ashore, they would call the other teams and rush up together. There were many tents a little farther from the sea. According to Qin Zishi, these patrol teams took turns to rest. It was guaranteed that there were people patrolling 24 hours a day, every minute and every second. Therefore, the night shift people were catching up on sleep in the tents. As soon as they arrived at the West Coast, before they could contact the person in charge, they heard someone shouting, "Zombies are coming ashore." A row of resting paranormals immediately jumped up and rushed to the place where the sound came from. In addition to the patrolling team members, there were also some relatively strong paranormals, like a fire brigade. Wherever there was a need, wherever there was a zombie, that was where there was a need. When the fighting was more frequent, everyone would be so tired that they would immediately lie down and rest after the fighting stopped. Even if someone helped them up, they would turn into a pile of soft mud. No matter what, Xiaoqing still respected these people. At the very least, they protected the entire Celestial Empire. No matter what their intentions were, whether it was to protect their families or to fulfill their duties, at least they deserved respect for what they did. Xiaoqing saw that they were all rushing to the same place, so she said, "There's no hurry to contact the person in charge. Let's go and see what level the smuggled zombies are at first." Qin Zishi nodded and said, "It's not convenient for you to take care of your child. Don't get too close." He knew that Xiaoqing's babies must be zombies too. But even if he knew that Little Bun and Little Blossom were zombies, he couldn't help but want to protect them because of their cute appearance. "I know." Xiao Qin nodded, and a group of people followed the crowd. In addition to the superpowered people who were fighting, there were also some superpowered people who had healing powers. They formed a rescue team. Whenever a superpowered person was injured, they would be carried to the rescue team for treatment. Those who were carried down must be seriously injured, but there were degrees of injuries. Those who were seriously injured were directly carried to the tents in the distance. Those who were slightly less injured were treated and bandaged before they could go back to the battlefield. The superpowered people in the rescue team were mainly water and wood superpowered people, which were the easiest to heal. Xiao Qin glanced at them, then turned her eyes to the group of people who were fighting on the beach. Surrounded in the middle was a golden-haired zombie. It was very tall and looked quite strong. Half of its golden hair was missing, and its face was rotten as if it came out of a horror movie. It should be at level 4, so it was relatively easy to deal with. After judging its level, the people around were relieved and ordered the superpowered people to go forward and test it in an orderly manner. After the test, they should be able to take down the zombie with a wave of full-strength attacks. Xiao Qin stood far away. Looking at the zombie, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. Chapter 503. Xiao Qin's intuition told her that something was wrong. Her intuition was very accurate. She had escaped from danger many times by relying on her intuition. As soon as she saw the zombie, she couldn't help but frown. She felt that something was wrong. She whispered to Qin Zishi, "I feel that something is wrong." "What's wrong?" Qin Zishi didn't find anything wrong, so she frowned and looked hard. However, no matter how hard she looked, it was just an ordinary level 4 zombie. She could tell from its reaction when it was attacked. "I don't know what to say." Xiao Qin gritted her teeth, then said, "Trust me, just tell everyone to be more vigilant." Before she finished speaking, there was a change in the scene. Suddenly, a black bug came out from behind the zombie that was struggling for its life. The bug was very small, so it couldn't be seen clearly at ordinary times. But what if it became a dense swarm? In a few seconds, the whole zombie was covered with bugs. Then, they gave up on the zombie and quickly crawled around. An Earth paranormal who was closer to the zombie quickly put up an Earth shield. He reacted very quickly, but he still screamed. The swarm of bugs crawled on his body in an instant. The Earth shield didn't work at all. It couldn't even stop them. He screamed and ran towards his companions. After running a few steps, he stopped. Then, the crows and the bugs scattered on their own. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Bones scattered all over the ground. The bones had been gnawed clean. The color was still red, but there was not even a trace of meat on them. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but step back in fear. However, the bugs were very fast. Some people couldn't help but throw things like fireballs and wind blades at the bugs. Then, they were horrified to find that the fireballs and the like disappeared quickly after they were thrown into the swarm. Then, those bugs seemed to be a little bigger, they could devour superpowers. Everyone, step back. Xiao Qin quickly stepped forward. Vines rose from the ground and turned into a wall of vines, then stopped the bugs. This was only temporary because Xiao Qin could feel that they were gnawing at the vines, and they were gnawing at them at a fast speed. Everyone couldn't help but start retreating. Qin Zishi hurriedly stepped forward to stop them. Xiao Qin called Yan Qiue over. "You try." Yan Qiue nodded and used his skill. Then, his expression changed. "This won't do. Their shells are very hard. I can't crush them." Xiao Qin did not panic. She took out a dagger, and then used the vines to grab a bug from the swarm. She slashed down with the dagger, and with a ding, it was unscathed. The black bug had a pointy head and extremely sharp teeth. Its body was covered with a black shell that was extremely hard. There were also faint lines on the shell that could not be seen. Xiao Qing took advantage of the fact that the wall of vines had not been eaten and called a few people over. She tried all kinds of methods and finally found that these things could indeed devour supernatural abilities. Whether it was supernatural abilities or sharp blades, they had no effect on them. Then, Xiao Qing unexpectedly found a white spot on the worm's stomach. She quietly stretched out her fingernail and poked it into the worm's stomach. She found its weakness, but fucking turn them over one by one and poke their navel. Not to mention that there were so many of them, just poking them was tiring. Xiao Qing was a little desperate. She originally wanted to throw away the worm's corpse, but in the end, she found a glass bottle and put it in. Find someone to send it back to the capital and study it. Chapter 504. Qin Zishi nodded. She found a speed paranormal and a few people to protect him and send him back to Jingdu. My intuition tells me that this is another disaster. Xiao Qing said expressionlessly, the only weakness we have found so far is that there is a soft white spot on its stomach. We haven't found anything else, but we can't turn them over one by one and poke their stomachs. The second point is that they are not interested in zombies. They probably use zombies as boats. Xiao Qing pointed at the 4th level zombies that were still alive. These insects were hidden in the bodies of zombies and smuggled over. She was now very curious about what happened in Country M that caused these black insects to smuggle into the country. After adding another layer of vine wall to encircle the insects, Xiao Qing said, "We can't go on like this. They keep eating my vines and keep growing." Her vines also contained elements of supernatural power. Everyone looked at each other. These insects came in a strange way. Fortunately, their individual attack power was not strong. Even so, they could not be killed or trapped, which was very troublesome. They could not just trap them like this and kill them one by one, right? They are reproducing. Someone screamed. Xiao Qing frowned and looked at them. Then she found that these insects, after reaching a certain size, would not grow. Then, they would excrete white eggs and hang on the vines. Soon, small insects would break out of their shells. The small insects would eat, and soon they would grow bigger and give birth to eggs immediately. Xiao Qing felt itchy all over in an instant, and her hair stood on end. Their hard shells could not be killed. They could devour supernatural power to strengthen themselves and reproduce so quickly. What were their shortcomings? There could not be a perfect race. Now, the idea of killing them one by one was also destroyed. Killing them would not be as fast as they grew. Xiao Qing could predict that if they left alive, they would quickly occupy the country and reproduce endlessly. Finally, the extinction of human beings. This future was too scary. Even if zombies could not be attacked, so what? What was the point of the world when there were only zombies left? Xiao Qing looked very serious. She killed a few more insects and handed them to Yan Qiyu. "I'll leave them to you." Yan Qiyu nodded and asked the people around him, "Is there a quiet place?" Immediately, someone led him away. Before Yan Qiyu could figure out how to contain the insects, they could only slowly think of a way. A group of people squatted behind the wall of vines and began to use their own methods to deal with those insects. Xiao Qing also tried one after another. Xiao Tang's poison was useless, Guangguang's poison was useless. She suddenly had a thought. Where was the daughter? Therefore, she threw out the daughter seed. The daughter seed was too small, so when it was attached to the insect, it would not be discovered at all. But, the seeds couldn't enter the insect's body, unless they entered through the insect's mouth. But even the seeds of daughter would be eaten. She was very helpless. After trying everything once, she released her man-eating flower and sighed, "Big flower, this is your little sister little flower." The man-eating flower could not understand. It only saw food. After being released, it stretched out its flower head without saying anything. The petals closed and swallowed a bunch of insects. Xiao Qing quickly patted the big flower. Baby, spit it out. This thing can't be eaten. They might even eat you. The big flower shook its flower head. It was originally a tyrant. How could it spit out the meat in its mouth? Chapter 505. Xiao Qing could only pull off the flower's head and petal. Then, she saw that the bugs were lying in the flower's stomach acid. Only some bug legs and bug shells were left. The flower shook off its head and spat out a bunch of bug shells that it couldn't digest. Then, it happily stretched out its head and ate a bunch of bugs into its stomach, shaking its head in satisfaction. It hadn't eaten its fill for a long time. Because it couldn't keep up with Xiao Qing's pace, the flower hadn't been released for a long time. Although the nostalgic Xiao Qing couldn't bear to replace it, she rarely used it. Unexpectedly, the flower, which didn't have any taboos when eating, had its uses. No wonder it was said that everything had its weakness. Xiao Qing found a bottle and said to the flower, "Spit out some saliva, or I won't let you eat. After you spit it out, you can eat whatever you want." The flower was using its leaves to cover its head and shook its head desperately. After hearing the second half of the sentence, it decisively opened its petals and spat out some transparent liquid. Then, the bottle Xiao Qing took out was corroded. The liquid was very corrosive. The glass bottle couldn't withstand it at all. Seeing that the bottle was corroded, the flower covered its head and shook its petals as if it was laughing. Then, Xiao Qing pulled off a petal and rolled it out into a cup to collect the liquid. The flower was speechless. Sob, its master was so cruel. Fortunately, as long as it had Xiao Qing's power, its petals could grow again. Therefore, the flower didn't feel particularly distressed. It just had a headache. After collecting some liquid, Xiao Qing asked someone to send it to Yan Qiue. Then, she found a place to sit down and watched the flower eat. The flower showed its cruel side. No matter how much it ate, it couldn't be full. The black bugs reproduced quickly, but it was still slower than the flower's eating speed. If it were any other time, the flower would have been eaten by a group of black bugs alone. But with Xiao Qing watching, the black bugs couldn't attack the flower and could only be eaten by the flower as snacks. Although the speed at which the big flower ate the black insects was faster than the speed at which it reproduced, it was not much faster. It could only be said that the number of black insects was slowly decreasing. Even so, it was enough to surprise the surrounding people. They cheered as if they had been saved. Xiao Qing, on the other hand, was not as optimistic. She said to Qin Zishi, "I suspect that there are already zombies carrying black bugs that have entered the mainland before this." "I don't think so. These black bugs reproduce very quickly. If there were really zombies carrying them into the inland, they should have exploded by now." Xiao Qing always felt that the crisis would not be solved so easily. She touched the flower's leaves and encouraged it to continue eating. She said, "If there's a chance, it's best to go to Country M and see what's going on there. There are zombies and black bugs that have been smuggled in. Who knows, there might be other things." Qin Zishi rested her chin on her hand and said, "The people in Jingdu are ready to go to Country M. Firstly, they want to investigate the situation there, especially in terms of strength. Secondly, many overseas Chinese have contacted Jingdu several times, wanting to return home. However, because of the zombie siege and the things on the coast, they don't have enough people, so this matter has been delayed." Xiao Qing nodded. Originally, she wanted to say that if the people in the capital wanted to go, they could bring her along. Later, she realized that things were different now. With her current status, no one would dare to bring her along. Qin Zishi seemed to have seen through Xiao Qing's thoughts. He whispered, "My grandfather sent people to organize it. If you want to go, we can bring you along. We'll talk about it when the time comes." Xiao Qing did not want to say too much. She didn't know what would happen when the time came. She fiddled with the flower's leaves and said, I'm not in the country these days. Is there any fresh news? Anyway, she was waiting for news from Yan Qiue. Instead of sitting idly, she might as well chat. A few days ago, I heard that a base has developed suppressants. If ordinary people are bitten by zombies, they can be injected with suppressants and return to normal. Qin Zishi held his chin and said, "It's just a rumor. I don't know whether they have developed it or not. The research institute in the capital is also useless. After the incident with you last time, the senior management in the research institute has changed. Now they are also researching suppressants, but there are no results yet." Xiao Qing nodded. If they could really develop suppressants, it would be a good thing. She didn't know whether the suppressants would be effective on infected people, like her and Air Dai. However, she felt that suppressants might not only bring good fortune, but also disaster, especially when the suppressants were not in the hands of the government. While she was chatting with Qin Zishi, Yan Qiue had quickly found the most important thing. This was also thanks to the flower. Chapter 506. It was said that everything had a weakness, and this saying was indeed true. The big flower was actually the nemesis of this group of black insects. These insects should be a type of mutated animal. Yan Qiue found that they were very similar to zombies. When they were dissected, they looked like a mass of dead meat. The so-called reproduction was actually a kind of division. The absorbed energy was converted into a part of the body, and when the limit was reached, it would split and become its own kind. This was a kind of strange zombie insect, so they were not interested in zombies. Their shells were made of a very special material. The degree of hardness was a little scary. The liquid secreted by the big flower was highly corrosive. Although the shell was invulnerable, it was afraid of the corrosive liquid of the big flower. But the problem was that there was a difference between the big flower and the ordinary man-eating flowers. The big flower evolved with Shaoqing, which meant that it was now a level 6 mutant plant. After reaching level 6, the most remarkable feature of the big flower was that the liquid secreted by it was much more corrosive than the ordinary man-eating flowers. So, could the ordinary man-eating flowers digest these black insects? Yan Qiue was not sure, because he did not have the materials at hand. The things he could use were limited. He just used the liquid secreted by the big flower to make a simple medicine. The name of the medicine was corrosive medicine, and then he took it to experiment. After the medicine was poured into the insects that touched it were corroded. Suddenly, a large area was emptied. It is effective. Yan Qiue was surprised. Give me some more time, and I can turn the medicine into a spray. Then, the people patrolling the sea will carry a bottle with them. If they find any black insects, they can kill them. Shaoqing nodded, and then said to the person in charge, "Please send your men to look for man-eating flowers nearby. See if the corrosive liquid of ordinary man-eating flowers has any effect on these insects." The person in charge nodded quickly and sent people out to look for them. Shaoqing threatened the big flower and spat out more liquid. She asked Yan Qiue to do the research. The big flower felt wronged, but it was soon comforted with so many insects to eat. After the insects were killed by the big flower, it had some indigestion. After all, although the insects were small, they carried a lot of energy. After eating them, it needed to digest. The plan to use De Hua to eliminate the insects was naturally announced to be a failure. After De Hua ate a group of insects, it took an entire night to digest them. It also grew an extra leaf, under which thin vines grew. In the past, it stood in the same place, waiting for prey to come to its door. Later, it was requisitioned by Shaoqing, and it could jump around and chase people. Now, it could stretch out its vines, tie up the prey, and put it into its mouth. It was really worth celebrating. Because of the big flower kept providing corrosive liquid. Of the team that went out to look for man-eating flowers also came back. They found several man-eating flowers, but unfortunately, their level was not high. The highest level was only level 3. The corrosive liquid had no effect at all. In the past 2 days, the big flower was put outside in a free-range mode. It also secretly ate one of its own kind. When it burped, it was found by Xiaoqing, and several petals fell off. The big leaf hugged its flower head and hid in the corner for a long time. Yan Qiue regretfully said that at least the corrosive liquid produced by man-eating flowers above level 5 could have an effect. Of course, the most effective one was the big flower. It was probably the highest level among the man-eating flowers now. Chapter 507. After the results were out, Xiaoqing thought for a long time and finally said, "Zishi, bring some people and stay here to guard against those black bugs. Qiue and I will go to the forest to see if there are any high-level man-eating flowers." Relying on the flowers alone was not feasible. They needed more corrosive liquid to make the spray. The flowers would not be able to produce that much even if they were exhausted. Qin Zishi knew that Xiaoqing was a zombie. She would be the safest in the forest, so he nodded. However, he could not help but remind her, "You must be careful and come back early." He always felt that he was like a husband whose wife reminded him to go on a long journey. "I know." Xiaoqing patted his head and said, "I will leave tomorrow morning. Qiue will make some more spray tonight. You guys can use it to protect yourselves." Actually, even if it was not for this matter, she would still go to the forest. She had been to a small forest once. This time, she wanted to go to the largest forest in the Celestial Empire. Moreover, she wanted to go to the deepest part of the forest. Anyway, after she broke through to level 6, she still needed a mutated plant. This time, she could also settle this matter. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The next morning, they left, leaving behind the spray that Yan Qiue had rushed to make overnight. Because of this, the flowers drooped their heads and leaves, looking pitiful. Yan Qiue only slept for 2 hours at night. She kept yawning and looked very pitiful. After Xiaoqing left with them, she went nearby and caught a mutated tiger so that Yan Qiue could sleep on its back for a while. Yiye was very proud. She squatted on the tiger's head and jumped around. The tiger did not dare to complain. It was already scared by Xiaoqing. Yiye was probably the first rabbit that dared to behave atrociously on the tiger's head. The largest forest was in the southernmost part of the Celestial Empire. There, it rained for 10 out of 12 months. Sometimes it was a downpour, and sometimes it was a continuous drizzle. Because of the overly humid weather, the forest there was exceptionally lush. When Xiaoqing and Dai arrived at the place, it was rare that it wasn't raining. The sky was clear, although it was cloudy and they couldn't see clearly. After a short rest, Xiaoqing let go of the tiger. She held the soft little fish and led the other animals at home into the jungle. She didn't dare to enter the forest for the first time with her strength. Now that she was at level 6, she didn't dare to say that she was the best in the world, but she could be considered one of the top few people. There were no weaklings around him, so he was exceptionally confident. Their days in the jungle were as comfortable as their own home. When they were hungry, there were ingredients all around them. They could eat whatever they wanted. It was very fresh. There were vegetables and meat. Xiaoqing even wanted to move the entire river town here. When we are free, we can come here and transplant some trees to the back of Rivertown. Then, we can catch some of these wild vegetables, mushrooms, and animals and rear them in captivity. When Xiaoqing said that, she felt that she was about to salivate. The happiest thing in the world was to have an ingredient warehouse at your doorstep. You could eat whatever you wanted. It was all fresh. The corner of Yan Qiue's mouth twitched. Then, she said, "As long as you are happy." The moment they entered the jungle, they met with a disaster. Usually, no one dared to enter this jungle because it was too dangerous. Even the periphery of the jungle was full of danger. There were simply not many people who dared to come to their deaths. Therefore, the plants and mutated animals in the jungle lived very freely. They acted like tyrants and no one dared to provoke them. But Xiaoqing came and even brought a family over. The entire jungle was in a mess. The originally arrogant mutated animals now ran away when they saw Xiaoqing. Because if they ran too slowly, they would become a plate of barbecue or a pot of pork ribs. Even the uglier animals, such as snakes, insects, rats, and ants, couldn't escape from Xiaoqing's kitchen knife. There was nothing that they didn't dare to eat. There were only things that they hadn't encountered yet. To the group of mutated animals, Xiaoqing and the rest were simply too terrifying. Not only the mutated animals, but also the mutated plants. They were also killed by Xiaoqing and the rest. To others, this was the jungle of death. To Xiaoqing, this was the jungle on the tip of the tongue. Those ferocious beasts were terrifying and fatal in the eyes of outsiders. But when Xiaoqing saw them, they would only be divided into two types. Those with tender meat would be roasted and fried. Those with old meat would be stewed and boiled. None of those poisonous creatures were able to escape the calamity. In terms of the horror of a foodie, Xiaoqing led Dai and the rest into the depths of the jungle. At first, they encountered many mutated beasts. When some saw them, they bared their teeth and rushed up with saliva. Later, as long as they heard the movement, they would swarm away, only leaving Xiaoqing and the rest to see a trail of dust. Yan Qiue began to doubt later. Were they really not in a zoo? Were they really not facing a small animal that had been domesticated to be very docile? She couldn't feel the horror of the jungle of death at all. She could only feel the delicious taste of the jungle equals the barbecue yesterday was so good. Yan Qiue was completely assimilated by the foodie. We are about to enter the inner area. Xiaoqing, who was originally very relaxed, also became vigilant. She was relaxed before for a reason. The outer area of the jungle was actually not dangerous, at least for them. But once they entered the inner area, Xiaoqing couldn't guarantee 100% safety. Along the way, they found many man-eating flowers. Unfortunately, these man-eating flowers were not of a high level. Xiaoqing didn't even want to collect the corrosive liquid. Everyone, be careful. Xiaoqing said very seriously. When Yan Qiue and the rest heard Xiaoqing's words, they became more vigilant. Especially Dai, he listened to Xiaoqing the most. His ears were pricked up, trying to hear the nearby sounds. He could distinguish where was dangerous and where was safe so that he could protect Xiaoqing well. They walked towards places suitable for the growth of man-eating flowers, trying to find a higher level of man-eating flowers. Then, they would collect some corrosive liquid and let the big flower swallow some. Swallowing its own kind could make the big flower grow faster and feed back to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing would also benefit a lot. It could be said that it was killing two birds with one stone. But since they entered the inner area, they hadn't encountered any living creatures for 2 days. Chapter 508. The whole forest was dead silent. It was not as lively as it was when they first came in. Xiaoqing suspected that the place where they stayed before was not the same as the place where they were now. The quieter it was, the more dangerous Xiaoqing felt. She estimated that they were now in the depths of the forest and would soon reach the deepest part. Let's take a rest first. It's late. The forest was dark even during the day because the tall trees blocked the sunlight. Xiaoqing estimated the time. It was already afternoon. She led the few animals at home to set up camp. They set up a big tent, the kind that the whole family could sleep in. Then, they went out to look for food. Yan Qiue stayed to take care of the kids. Xiaoqing and Dai separated. One went to the east, while the other went to the west. One was responsible for looking for firewood, while the other was responsible for hunting. Dai couldn't tell which kind of wild vegetables were edible, so the first task was given to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing mainly looked for wild vegetables, but if she saw some delicious prey, she would also help. After they entered the inner area, it was difficult to meet mutated animals, unless they took the initiative to look for them. For example, they could dig up their nests. Yes, they could dig up their nests directly. No matter how deep they hid, they couldn't hide from Dai's search. He was quite sensitive in this aspect. Xiaoqing pushed aside the grass to look for edible wild vegetables, mushrooms, and fungus growing under the trees. As long as it was edible, she would not let it go. She pushed aside the grass and found a pile of delicious mushrooms. She picked them and put them into the telepathic eye space. When she was ready to go to the next place, she saw a field of man-eating flowers not far away. What did it mean to travel far and wide in search of something, only to find it by chance? This was it. It was a whole field of man-eating flowers. Some plants were still small, and the tender flowers hadn't bloomed yet. Some were showing their fangs and claws, shaking their heads. There were two kinds of man-eating flowers. One kind had no leaves, only a huge flower head. It was short and emitted a foul smell to attract insects and small animals. One kind was like De Hua, which could chase after people and bite them when they were arrogant. The former type of man-eating flower grew in clumps. They often grew together and emitted a strong smell, attracting a lot of prey. The latter kind of man-eating flower was a killer in the jungle. They usually lived in groups of 1 or 2, never more than 3 or 4. This place was filled with the same species as the big flowers. They grew one after another, going against the habits of man-eating flowers. Looking up, all he could see were gorgeous flowers swaying their heads, waiting for prey to come closer. Although they looked lazy now, as long as the prey came close, they would quickly become ferocious hunters and quickly devour the prey. Xiaoqing did not dare to be careless. When she approached, she first summoned the vines. The dense vines tightly clustered around her, protecting Xiaoqing. As soon as Xiaoqing got close to the man-eating flowers, those man-eating flowers quickly raised their heads. Some of them were closer to Xiaoqing. They had already opened their petals, revealing the sharp thorns hidden in the petals. Then, they were whipped by the vines and fell to the ground. After Xiaoqing entered the flower field, from the outside, she seemed to be surrounded. All the man-eating flowers turned their heads to her, eyeing covetously, as if they wanted to eat her. There were too many man-eating flowers here, especially in the periphery of the flower field. They were all low-level. Xiaoqing felt that she could release the big flowers and let them eat happily. There was a sweet smell in the air. Contrary to this smell, the thorns of the man-eating flowers were exposed in the air. Those sharp thorns were like fangs, shining with cold light. Chapter 509. The big flower was released by Xiaoqing. As soon as it came out, it saw the dense man-eating flowers in front of it. It rubbed its leaves happily, and the petals opened and closed, trying to get into the flowers to eat. Those man-eating flowers had been arrogantly standing upright. Even if they were being whipped around by the vines, they could still show their teeth to Xiaoqing tenaciously. But as soon as the big flower came out, the arrogant man-eating flowers were frightened at once. One by one, their whole flower heads drooped down, as if they had surrendered. Yes, they surrendered to the big flower. The big flower was a level 6 man-eating flower, which had crushed them in level. It could be said that the big flower deserved to be the king among the man-eating flowers. All the man-eating flowers lowered their heads. However, there was one man-eating flower that angrily stretched out its leaves. Thin vines drilled out from under the leaves. In the air, it was as if a group of demons were dancing wildly. Xiaoqing's eyes lit up at once. A high-level man-eating flower. The big flower was already level 6, but it just sprouted its vines not long ago. So the man-eating flower in front of her was probably a little more high-level than the big flower. What Xiaoqing was looking for was the high-level man-eating flower, wasn't it? This man-eating flower should be the king of the man-eating flowers. Before the big flower came, it deserved to be the first. But the big flower came and challenged its position, so it was angry. The flower was raised by Xiaoqing, and it was almost lawless. Not to mention the man-eating flower that was a little stronger than it, even if it was a level 7 or 8 man-eating flower in front of it, it would dare to provoke it arrogantly. It was like a spoiled brat. As soon as it felt the provocation from another man-eating flower, it immediately opened its fat petals. The petals of the big flower were especially thick and large. The diameter of the entire flower head was about 1 meter. The outer petals were half a meter long, and the inner petals were tender and much shorter. It was the inner petals that were often pulled off by Xiaoqing. The flower was already very big, but the man-eating flower was a little bigger than the flower. Its plump petals were red with a hint of purple, and even its mouthpiece looked longer than the flowers. The big flower was very dissatisfied. Since it followed Xiaoqing, it had always been the boss of Xiaoqing. When had it ever been suppressed by other flowers? He immediately waved his roots and jumped over. The tender tentacles grew in the wind in an instant, turning into long vines that shot towards the man-eating flower at lightning speed. The man-eating flower's vines immediately stretched out and fought with the big flower in the air. The surrounding man-eating flowers all lowered their heads obediently and lay on the ground, shivering. This was a fight between two kings. The only thing they could do was to watch honestly and carefully shrink, so as not to be affected. The man-eating flower was a little more advanced than the big flower. It was reasonable to say that it was stronger than the big flower. However, there was still Xiaoqing behind the big flower to provide it with energy, so the two flowers were equally matched and in a stalemate. Xiaoqing calmly watched the two flowers fighting and still had time to tell the big flower, "Don't break it. You know I need it to provide me with corrosive liquid. If it is broken, you can replace it and stay in the laboratory to provide corrosive liquid every day." The big flower was scared and its petals trembled. It didn't dare to be arrogant and fought with the man-eating flower on the opposite side. Xiaoqing took advantage of the time when they were fighting and released Guangguang. As soon as Guangguang took root in the soil, it stretched its branches and leaves comfortably. Xiaoqing found that it was going to upgrade. Chapter 5:10. The moment the roots touched the soil, Guangguang's roots absorbed an abundant amount of energy, which was even transferred to Xiaoqing's body. Xiaoqing pulled out her dagger and parted the dense cannibal flowers. Then, she found that the soil below was red. The greasy sweetness did not come from the cannibal flowers, but from the red soil. When she stepped on it, she could see the red liquid oozing out of the soil, which looked like blood. Xiaoqing was sure that the soil contained abundant energy, which could support such a group of cannibal flowers and make a king among them. Good stuff. Xiaoqing pinched a handful of soil and twisted it with her fingers. The red soil was very fine, like the sand left behind after being washed by water countless times on the beach. It was also a little soft. After twisting the soft soil, Xiaoqing's fingers were left with a light red color. She sniffed it, and it smelled very sweet. If she could smell the sweetness with her nose, it was at least at the level of greasy sweetness. Xiaoqing said to the big flower, "Stick the roots in." The big flower did not know what was going on, but it habitually obeyed Xiaoqing's order and quickly stuck the roots it used as its feet into the ground. In an instant, the energy flowing into its body made it feel as if it was floating in the air. Some of the energy also flowed into Xiaoqing's body through its body. Xiaoqing could not help but let out all her babies. When those vines and the roots of the chiotang and other plants went into the ground, Xiaoqing had the illusion that she was going to reach the middle stage of level 6 immediately. No, it was not an illusion. If she squatted here and let her little vines absorb the energy for a while, she might really reach the middle stage of level 6. The higher the level, the harder it was to break through. At her level, she was absorbing high-level zombie nuclei every day, but the progress was only a little. Xiao Qing estimated that if there were no special circumstances, it would take her more than a year to reach the middle stage of level 6. But now, it took her more than a year to reach the middle stage of level 6. What kind of speed was that? Xiao Qing did not want to let the big flower kill the cannibal flower. She wanted to move a small stool, eat some sunflower seeds, and watch the show while absorbing the energy. That was awesome. But after thinking about it, she gave up because she had to go back to cook. Cooking was the most important thing in the world. She could not let her babies starve. Xiao Qing raised her hand, and countless vines flew out, tightly binding the cannibal flower. At the same time, Guang began to shake its branches and leaves, and stars slowly fell slowly. It was a beautiful scene. But as long as these little dots of light fell on the petals or leaves of the man-eating flower, the flower would lose all its strength and slowly go limp. Even the biggest flower was no exception. The big flower, it had just warmed up. It had not come out for a long time. It had finally found an opponent that was on par with it and could have a great battle, but it had been defeated by its master. It could not tell if this was a tragedy or a blessing. Xiao Qing pulled the huge cannibal flower out of the soil. Once it was out of the soil, it became even more dispirited. Xiao Qing tied it up tightly to prevent it from escaping. When they got back, she would hand it over to Yan Qiue and let her squeeze out all the corrosive juice in its body. If it was obedient, Xiao Qing would keep it and extract the corrosive juice after a period of time. If it was not obedient, it was fine. She would let the big flower eat it after she squeezed out all the corrosive juice in its body. It would not go to waste no matter what. The dispirited cannibal flower could not help but shiver. It trembled a little and curled up its leaves. Without this cannibal flower, the big flower was really the king of the cannibal flowers. It roared and pounced forward. It picked a few strong man-eating flowers and swallowed them. The remaining man-eating flowers all lay on the ground pitifully. They expressed their submission and fear at the same time. Xiao Qing glanced at it and ordered the big flower to take its little brothers to one side. She wanted to take away the soil in the ground. With the big flower's order, the cannibal flowers had to obey even if they were unwilling. Of course, there were also some who disobeyed, and they all became the big flower's food. A bunch of cannibal flowers pulled themselves out of the ground, touched the ground with their roots, and ran away with their leaves holding the flower heads. The scene was very funny and inexplicably funny. After they left, they stood in a row from tall to short, trembling and waiting for the big flower to choose something to eat. Xiao Qing rolled up her sleeves and was ready to dig 3 feet into the ground. Chapter 5:11. After the man-eating flowers left, the ground was red. The color of the soil was very bright, as if blood had been poured down and soaked the ground. However, he did not know how much blood would be needed to completely soak this piece of land, to the point where the blood would overflow from it. Xiao Qing rolled up her sleeves and took out a shovel from the space. Sometimes, her space was like a robot cat's pocket, always finding strange things. For example, this shovel that she didn't know when she threw it in. The soil below was also red. After digging nearly half a meter deep, the color of the soil returned to normal. Xiao Qing didn't know why the soil became like this, but it was enough for her to know that the soil was good. Xiao Qing, who was addicted to digging the soil, forgot the time. Yan Qiue and the others, who had been waiting for her for a long time, came out to look for her, only to find that Xiao Qing was digging the soil with her butt up. She was digging happily. The space was originally full of things, but she directly cleared away some of the useless things and put the soil in. After seeing Yan Qiue and the others, Xiao Qing waved her hand, "Come and help me." At first, Yan Qiue thought that there was something in the ground and she was looking for it. Later, he found that Xiaoqing was just looking for the soil in the ground. The corner of his mouth twitched. He took the shovel from Xiaoqing and began to work. What's the problem? He'd better ask after it was over. Looking at Xiaoqing's fanatical look, he guessed that he couldn't get the answer now. The two of them struggled for a long time before they dug out all the red soil and put it into Xiaoqing's space. Xiaoqing was very satisfied. She said to Yan Qiue, I'm going to take the seeds of the plants back and plant them in Jiang City. Why do you suddenly want to do this? Yan Qiue asked in confusion. Xiaoqing then told Yan Qiue what she had discovered. Yan Qiue was also curious. Get me some when we get back. I'll do my research. Xiaoqing agreed. Then, she instructed De Hua to pick what she needed to pick and eat what she could eat. She also didn't forget to leave some seeds for others. It was too cruel to eat all the seeds until they became extinct. The big flower picked a few that seemed to be of a higher level and ate them. As for the rest of the seedlings, it generously let them go. There was a saying among humans that was called draining the pond to catch all the fish. In its opinion, it was also extremely stupid. These man-eating flowers stayed where they were and wouldn't run away. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to run far. It had eaten them all at once, and it wouldn't be able to eat them again. It was better to keep some of the less tasty seedlings and wait for them to grow up before eating them. What was this behavior called again? That's right, captivity. This forest was where it kept its food. Thinking about it, such a large forest was like a refrigerator that could keep food fresh. There was food everywhere. It could come and eat whenever it wanted to. It was simply awesome. The man-eating flowers that were let go trembled. Under De Hua's tyranny, they obediently returned to their original positions and took root near their original positions. This way, De Hua wouldn't have to look everywhere the next time it came. It was very convenient. She felt that she was so chicken juicy equals V equals, let's go. Xiaoqing patted De Hua's head. Then, she brought De Hua and the other man-eating flower that was tied up into a ball and returned with Yan Qiue. Dai was in charge of looking after the children. When they returned, Xiaoyu was lying on Dai's neck. Dai held Xiao Hua's left hand and Little Bun's right hand. It was very harmonious. It was like a group of left-behind children waiting for their parents to return. Xiaoqing's heart ached as she patted Dai's head. Then, she threw the man-eating flower into a corner. Qiue, bring some juice back. De Hua will cooperate with you. Discuss with this man-eating flower. If it's willing to continue cooperating with you in your research, we'll keep it. If it's not willing, it's fine. It's not bad to let De Hua eat all of its corrosive juice. Chapter 5:12. The man-eating flower in the corner trembled when it heard that. At its level, it had a certain level of consciousness. It was simply a threat to a flower. Flowers also had the right to be a flower. Before the angry man-eating flower could express how angry it was dragged into the tent by Yan Qiue. The big flower also jumped over, shaking its leaves, like a playboy's henchman. Yan Qiue smiled and took out the tools to extract the juice, then took out a test tube made of the big flower's petals. He said very gently, "Are you willing to cooperate with me, or are you willing to be eaten? I'm an ambitious man-eating flower." The man-eating flower shook its head, and lowered its head to show that it surrendered. It was better to live than to die. After all, it was a high-level man-eating flower. It would be a pity if it died. With the man-eating flower in hand, they had completed half of the purpose of this trip. The other half was naturally a plant that Xiaoqing wanted to subdue. Therefore, they didn't leave immediately, and planned to go deeper. After a night's rest, they were ready to continue moving forward. Probably their good luck was almost used up, so they continued to move forward for another 3 days. It seemed that they were infinitely close to the core, but they didn't encounter anything. Looking at the time, Xiao Qing couldn't help but give up. I'm worried that something has happened outside. Let's go back first. Let's walk for another day. If we still haven't found anything, we'll go back. Yan Qiue insisted. People who didn't know him would think that he wanted to subdue the plant. In Yan Qiue's heart, probably all the people in the world were not as important as a single hair on Xiao Qing's body. He didn't want to delay Xiao Qing's improvement because of other people's affairs. He also knew that Xiao Qing would definitely not agree with his idea, so he compromised. Xiao Qing nodded and agreed. Then she felt very lucky that she didn't leave early, because in the afternoon of the second day, when they were about to leave, they finally arrived at the deepest part of the jungle, which was also the most mysterious place. The grass on the ground grew taller and thicker. Xiao Qing felt that something was wrong. She told the people around her to be careful. Then, she used the vines to open a path. The vines parted the grass, revealing a secret realm that looked like a paradise. It was very beautiful. The tall and low trees were shining with green fluorescence. There were also groups of fireflies under the trees. The grass was soft, and there was even a little dew on the leaves. The grass below looked especially fresh. It was so beautiful that it was like an illusion. Xiao Qing couldn't help but rub her eyes to make sure that she didn't come to the wrong place. Was this really a forest filled with danger? She was starting to have doubts. Before they stepped in, a bouncing rabbit jumped in. In the next second, red vines drilled out of the ground like greedy tongues, wrapped around the rabbit and dragged it away. The peaceful and quiet atmosphere was broken in an instant. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. This was the jungle she knew. Everyone, be careful. Xiao Qing was the first to walk in. Although she knew that there were many dangers under the gorgeous appearance, this place was still too beautiful. It was like the paradise that many young girls dreamed of when they were young. Xiao Qing walked a few steps and felt that something was wrong. The footsteps of Dai and the others disappeared. Xiao Qing turned around, but there was no one behind her. Xiao Qing's expression changed immediately. Little Bun, Dai, and Yan Qiue were the most important people to her. Also, Xiao Hua and Xiao Yu had joined her team. They were the people that she wanted to protect. However, in just a few seconds, they were all gone. Xiao Qing's face turned pale. She couldn't help but walk back to look for Dai and the others. The more she walked, the more she felt that something was wrong. The jungle around her had turned into tall buildings. Mu Lin appeared beside her with a big belly. His eyes were curved. Ah Qing, what do you think the child should be named? Mu Lin. Xiao Qing couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were a little sore. Her fingertips trembled as she held Mu Lin's hand. It was warm. Ah Qing, what's wrong? Mu Lin touched Xiao Qing's forehead in confusion. It's not hot, I'm fine. Xiao Qing tried hard to hold back the urge to cry. Although she knew that she didn't have tears, she said, didn't we talk about this before? If you give birth to the child, let him be called Mu Nianqing. It sounds good whether it's a boy or a girl. Mu Lin bit his lips and said, but the child has to follow his father's surname. Your surname is Zheng. Xiao Qing gently touched Mu Lin's stomach and smiled. That's pretty good too. I want him to be called Jingxiang. I miss you, Mu Lin said softly. Mu Lin said softly, it doesn't matter if you go to the ends of the earth or if you're by my side. I'll miss you. Xiao Qing couldn't hold it in anymore. She clearly didn't have tears, but she still felt that her eyes were wet. Jingxiang, it's very nice, I have a baby too. I haven't named him yet. He's just waiting for you. Didn't you say that you want to be his godmother? Xiao Qing held Mu Lin's hand tightly as if Mu Lin would disappear if she let go. Mu Lin said in surprise, "Where is he? I want to see my godson. Hurry up and call him out." "I'll bring you to see him soon," Xiao Qing said softly, "he's very cute. His facial features are like mine. You'll definitely like him. Your son must be very handsome. If I give birth to a daughter, I'll marry your son in the future." Mu Lin leaned on Xiao Qing's shoulder and chuckled. "I remember when I was young, I've said that if you were a boy, I'd definitely marry you. Since I can't marry you, I'll let my daughter marry your son. I still don't know if it's a boy or a girl in your belly." Xiao Qing hugged Mu Lin tightly. It was very warm, very warm. It was so warm that it made her want to sleep. The corners of her eyes were a little moist and trembling. After a long time, she said softly, "I miss you too, Mu Lin. But, this isn't you." She waved her hand gently and her sharp nails scratched out. Mu Lin's frightened expression froze and finally turned into flying green spots. A long vine was inserted into Xiao Qing's chest like a straw, sucking something. Xiao Qing sneered. She didn't have blood at all. Chapter 513. She had sensed that something was wrong from the beginning, but the illusion was too realistic, so she was in a trance for a moment. The person who appeared in the illusion was actually Mu Lin. Mu Lin. The two of them came out from the orphanage together. It could be said that they depended on each other for survival. During the toughest times, the two of them had to eat a dry steamed bun, the kind that didn't even have a pickle. They had gone through the toughest times together. They had gone through thick and thin together. Xiao Qing still remembered Mu Lin's words, "If you were a man, I would marry you." However, after the apocalypse, she had gone through almost half of the country, but she had not met Mu Lin. To be honest, Xiao Qing was in despair. After all, it was the apocalypse. No one dared to say that they could survive until now. Even Xiao Qing, who had confidence in Mu Lin, did not dare to say it. She could only keep her worries in her heart. Unexpectedly, Mu Lin appeared in this environment. Xiao Qing had noticed when the vine pierced into her chest and sucked her blood. She did not break free because she wanted to take another look at Mu Lin. Zombies. Where did the blood come from? Xiao Qing tore off the vine that pierced into her body. She glanced around and immediately found the unconscious Yan Qiue and the others. Each of them was pierced by a thin vine. The others were fine, but Yan Qiue could not bear it. He was a normal person. He would die if he lost too much blood. Xiao Qing quickly cut off the vine on Yan Qiue's body and covered the wound. The wound was very thin, but blood was still flowing out. Yan Qiue frowned. His face was pale. After the vine was cut off, he suddenly opened his eyes and hugged Xiao Qing. "No." Xiao Qing was shocked. She quickly asked, "What's wrong?" "Sorry, I was careless." Yan Qiue's eyes were unfocused. After he focused on Xiao Qing, he was relieved and hugged Xiao Qing tightly. "Don't leave me." Xiao Qing felt that he probably saw something similar to them breaking up in the illusion. After comforting Yan Qiue, Xiao Qing rescued the others. During this time, Yan Qiue had been hugging his knees with a cold look in his eyes. He had encountered an illusion. In the illusion, Xiao Qing had saved many people, but they wanted to kill Xiao Qing because Xiao Qing was a zombie. Because she was not one of them, she was bound to have evil intentions. Yan Qiue couldn't stop him. He vaguely remembered that he had been chopped into minced meat. His only intact hand was still grabbing onto someone's pants. He was clearly dead, but he could still watch those people hurt the woman he loved the most. Her pain and despair were deeply imprinted on Yan Qiue's body. Yan Qiue only felt that even the slightest breath would make his heart ache terribly. This was because he knew that with Xiao Qing's personality, if she really encountered a large-scale disaster, she would really save people. And with the deep-rooted bad habits of human beings, as long as they found out Xiao Qing's identity, they would also repay kindness with ingratitude. Although he knew that the possibility of this kind of thing happening was very small, Yan Qiue couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but be afraid and think about it. What if? Yan Qiue didn't want to see any threat to Xiao Qing's safety, not even the slightest. After Xiao Qing saved everyone, they all woke up. Everyone's illusion was different, but the similarity was probably related to emotions. Happiness, anger, sadness, happiness, and unhappiness. After saving people, Xiao Qing set her eyes on the flower in the center. It was very beautiful. Chapter 5:14. Anyone who saw everything in front of them would be most suspicious of this tree. It was taller than Guang Guang and was as tall as a canopy. There were many small animals that looked like fireflies resting on the branches and leaves, making the entire tree look like it was glowing. However, the first thing that Xiao Qing saw was the vines that wrapped around the tree. The vines looked very thin and docile. Even the thorns looked a little crisp and soft. The vines extended all the way to the crown of the tree. There was a very beautiful flower that poked its head out from the crown of the tree. The young petals were very big and the color was a bright red. The color was slightly dark, contrasting with the delicate center of the flower. It was like the contrast between venous blood and arterial blood. The stamen of the flower was curled up like small tentacles. It looked very harmless, but Xiao Qing couldn't take her eyes off this flower. The hallucinogenic fragrance was emitted from this flower. It could be said that the culprit that made Xiao Qing and the others fall into a coma was this flower. The more delicate it looked, the more dangerous it felt to Xiao Qing. It made Xiao Qing feel that this flower was watered with blood to become its current color. As soon as Xiao Qing broke free from this flower, it immediately curled up and acted harmless, trying to fool Xiao Qing. But how was that possible? Xiao Qing sneered and released her big flower and vines. She also released Guang Guang to protect Er Dai and the others so that they wouldn't be hurt. Only then did she feel at ease to deal with this flower. It was relatively easy for her to suppress this flower. Its level was quite high, but compared to Xiao Qing, who had a group of little brothers, it was still a lot weaker. However, Xiao Qing wanted to see what abilities it had to decide if she should use it as the sixth plant. After all, there was a limit to the number of slots she had. A precious slot needed to be carefully studied before she could confirm it. Otherwise, it would be extremely troublesome if she found that it was no longer useful and had to change it. Then, Xiao Qing discovered that this flower's greatest ability was to cause hallucinations. If its hallucinations were combined with Guang Guang, the effect would be very good. Moreover, its vines could also assist Xiao Qing's vines. When the time came, she would put down Guang Guang's blessing and let the flower hide on Guang Guang's body. Then, she would release the vines. Whoever entered this domain would die. Xiao Qing happily subdued the flower. Then, she realized that its most powerful ability was not hallucination, but an ability similar to Little Bun's devouring ability. It could take root in the bodies of humans, animals, and even plants. It could absorb blood and plant juices and convert them into energy to nourish itself. In other words, as long as there were living creatures around it, it would never run out of energy. Coupled with its hallucinogenic ability in the attack power of its vines, not many people were a match for it. Especially when it relied on the tenacious tree it was clinging to, it was simply invincible. In the end, it was unlucky to meet Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing was its nemesis. Firstly, Xiao Qing did not have fresh blood and would not provide it with any energy. Secondly, it stretched out its vines, wanting to pierce into the bodies of the surrounding plants to absorb some energy. In the end, just as the thin vines stretched out, it was broken by Xiao Qing's vines, a second of silence. After following Xiao Qing was like a tiger that had grown wings. She was now the least afraid of group fights. When the time came, she would stand in the crowd, put down Guang Guang, plant the flower she named Little Red, and scatter the daughter. With Lord Vine in hand, Chiu Tang would ambush, and the big flower would take the heads of people. When its power was exhausted, she would let Little Red absorb the energy and feed it back to her. She was invincible as if she had cheated. Xiao Qing was satisfied. She prepared to leave with the injured people in the house. Then, she shrunk Little Red that was wrapped around her wrist. Suddenly, it stretched out its feelers and pointed behind the tree. What was there? Xiao Qing instructed Dai to lean on Guang Guang and take care of everyone. Then, she walked over. As soon as she walked over, Xiao Qing was dumbfounded. Behind the tree, there was a deep pit. The pit was very deep, but when she lowered her head, she could see something at the bottom of the pit. There was a huge thing that looked like a flower bud at the bottom of the pit. If one ignored the outer layer of the placenta, this flower bud looked more like a giant heart. There were many bones hanging on the walls of the pit. It was the same at the bottom of the pit. There were probably many animals or humans who had become the waste of this heart. Little Red vaguely conveyed this information to Xiao Qing. These prey were all thrown in by the surrounding plants as fertilizer. This heart was considered a kind of plant, but it was not. It contained a lot of energy. Once it matured and was swallowed, there was a chance for it to rise to level 7 or even level 8. As the overlord of this area, Little Red had already treated this thing as something in her pocket. She was just waiting for it to mature so that she could eat it. In the end, she did not expect that it would become something in Xiao Qing's pocket. So, Little Red could not help but offer up this treasure. She also could not bear to let the thing that she had raised for so long go to another plant. Rather than letting someone else take advantage of it, she would rather give it to her own master. Since she had already boarded the pirate ship, the stronger Xiao Qing was, the better it would be for Little Red. It could be said that Little Red's tactic of changing the rudder according to the wind was pretty good. At the very least, Big Red was stomping its feet in anger. Big Red had fallen out of favor for a long time. It had finally regained its favor after much difficulty, but there was actually a new flower who was fawning over its master the moment it joined the crew. Did she not know the concept of first come, first served? Did she not know that she had to respect Old Red? Was it not good to be a quiet and beautiful flower? Why did she have to compete with it for favor? How shameless! Xiao Qing did not know that there were scheming flowers around her who were secretly opposing her. She was using vines to tie up a big tree at the side, trying to go down to the bottom of the pit and pull out the thing by its roots. It was not mature yet. If she ate it now, the effect would definitely not be great. However, Xiao Qing was not afraid. Didn't she just harvest a pile of soil that contained rich energy? She could totally pull this thing out and take it back to raise it. How troublesome would it be to leave it here? No one knew when someone would come and take this thing away. When that time came, where would Xiao Qing go to cry? The one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers. It would be more reassuring to raise it in her own home. Therefore, Xiao Qing climbed down. She pulled the vines, stepped on the wall, and carefully reached the bottom of the pit. When she reached the bottom of the pit and observed this thing at a close distance, she felt that this thing was even more like a heart. Whether it was the clear veins under the skin or the shape, it was very similar to a heart. It was more like it would beat slowly every once in a while. It was like the heart was expanding, and shrinking along with a person's breathing. It was too similar. It was a little creepy, especially Xiao Qing. She was stunned for a long time, not knowing how to start. Chapter 5:15. Reality proved that there were benefits to having a scary appearance. At least, even Xiao Qing, with her mental fortitude, felt helpless when faced with this thing. Before she could do anything, the big flower took action. Many vines crawled out from under the big flower's leaves and wrapped around the heart-like thing. It was pulled out with brute force. The roots of this thing looked like the feet of an octopus. They were soft and wriggling. Xiao Qing was a little worried. She couldn't just hug it everywhere she went, right? She suddenly had an idea. If the vegetables she pulled out could be put into her space, what about this thing? As soon as she thought of it, she tried it out. She casually stuffed this thing into her space, and it actually went in. Her space had always been unable to store living things. Could it be that this thing wasn't a living thing? Anyway, it was a good thing. At least it was more convenient for her. Xiao Qing even planted this thing on the red soil so that she could climb up with ease. Her whole family was old, weak, sick, and disabled now. Finally, she completed this task perfectly and could leave without any regrets. On the way back, Xiao Qing wanted to pull out more kinds of plants and plant them near Jiangqing City or directly in the city. However, she found that ordinary mutant plants could be put into her space. But after taking them out, they could only be eaten like vegetables. The only thing that was still alive was the heart. She had to give up and leave reluctantly. She planned to organize some people and come back after a period of time. When they returned to the seaside as fast as they could, Qin Zishi had already gone back to the capital once and brought news from there. The capital had decided to send people to Country M. In addition to the previous two reasons, there was one more reason, which was to find the source of the black bugs. After research in Jingdong, they found that the black bugs had a mother. As long as the mother didn't die, it could produce a lot of black bugs every day. It was useless to treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Among the people who went abroad, there were Wu Jiaojiao, the boss of thorns and roses, Jin Mingyu, the boss of ice, and Zhu Machen. In addition to the three of them, there was another very powerful paranormal called Tu Xian. He was a man who looked very polite and cultured. He also brought along two similar civilian staff members. There was also Qin Zishi and Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing didn't plan to bring Yan Qiue along this time because someone had to send the kids back. Yan Qiue was very against it, but the head of the family was Xiao Qing. He could only sob and leave with the three children, letting Xiao Qing and Er Dai have their own world. Before they boarded the ship, the others did not know that two more people were added to this operation. When the ship was about to set sail, Xiao Qing and Er Dai boarded the ship. As soon as the two of them came up, some people became stiff. That year, Xiao Qing was angry for Lan Yan and almost tore down the whole capital. They all saw it. Now, this god of slaughter actually wanted to work with them. Xiao Qing smiled and waved her hand. "We meet again. How have you been recently?" Jin Mingyu said dryly, "Pretty good." Wu Jiaojiao was more curious because she still refused to believe that Xiao Qing and Er Dai were zombies. How did they look like zombies? If zombies were like the two of them, humans would have gone extinct a long time ago. The two civilian staff members were more scared. They shrank into a corner and trembled. After Xiao Qing greeted them, she went to a corner with Qin Zishi and Zhu Machen. The few of them sat near the railing and looked at the sea while chatting. Chapter 5:16. Xiao Qing actually had a selfish motive for this trip. She wanted to have a one-on-one honeymoon with Er Dai and then with Yan Qiue. According to the order of arrival, the first honeymoon would naturally be with Er Dai. There were some aspects of a 3-on-1 honeymoon that were inconvenient. Moreover, if one was close to one, the other would be left out. If one was close to one, the other would be left out. Indeed, a two-person world was the best. I remember the last time we went out to sea. We encountered an underwater volcano eruption. Xiao Qing wanted to laugh when she thought about it. I've always thought that I have a good character. In the end, wherever I go, something is bound to happen. Qin Zixi expression immediately changed. My sister Qing, please don't jinx it. Xiao Qing said helplessly, how can this thing be so effective? If whatever I say comes true, we'll definitely be safe this time. As she spoke, she laughed. If my mouth is really so effective, I'll curse those who oppose me to die first. Qin Zixi could only laugh helplessly. At night, the few of them gathered in Xiao Qing's room to cook. Cheng Lixue prepared a double-flavored pot with ingredients for San Xian on one side and super spicy ingredients on the other. The few of them ate until their lips were red and a little numb. At this moment, the helmsman's panicked voice suddenly came from outside. We've encountered a storm. Everyone, try to stay in your rooms. Don't come out, and don't go to the deck. Xiao Qing, the way Qin Zixi and the others looked at Xiao Qing was a little strange. This crow's beak was really accurate. Xiao Qing felt like she had been shot in the knee. Could it be that she was actually the nth generation heir of the Yanling family? Alright, let's go back to our rooms when we're full. Xiao Qing said helplessly, from what you said, it shouldn't be a big storm. Moreover, we're not far from the shore. Even if the ship, Sister Qing. Qin Zixi turned pale with fright. Don't say it. Xiao Qing, she fell silent and obediently went to bed with her air dye. Xiao Qing actually didn't care about whether the boat would capsize or not. The only thing she cared about was that if the boat capsized, they would have to go back and change to another boat, which would be a waste of time. As for other aspects, she was not worried. This was probably confidence brought about by strength. Xiao Qing hugged air dye and climbed onto the bed. Then she realized that she hadn't hugged air dye like this for a long time. The last time she hugged air dye like this was a long time ago. She seemed to have neglected air dye recently. Air dye didn't know how to speak. She didn't know how to express her emotions. Even if she was unhappy, she would only look at Xiao Qing quietly with her big eyes. As long as Xiao Qing looked at her, there would only be happiness in her eyes. Air dye was so obedient that people would unconsciously feel relieved and forget about her. Xiao Qing was very distressed. She hugged air dye and kissed the top of his head. She said in a muffled voice, actually, you're cute when you're jealous. You're cute when you're naughty. You're cute no matter what. Air dye hugged Xiao Qing back. Since they were together, he had become quieter and more obedient. It was as if he had matured overnight. In fact, if one looked carefully, they would find that he was still the jealous and spoiled air dye. When we go back, we'll find a way to plant plants all around Jiang City. They must be edible. It's best if they are edible and can be used for defense. I want to open up a separate piece of land and plant all the things you like to eat. Xiao Qing leaned on air dye and sighed, so what if it's the end of the world? As long as we're happy as a family, it's fine. Air dye quietly took off his clothes so that Xiao Qing could rest on his chest. Then he hugged Xiao Qing with satisfaction. He didn't know about those things. He only knew that he liked Xiao Qing and wanted to be with her forever. Air dye loved other people because he loved them. If those people weren't important to Xiao Qing, he wouldn't even look at them. The best time of his life was the time he spent with Xiao Qing. Although these days, some strange images flashed in his mind. Those images didn't look like him. He should be air dye. He should be the silly air dye that belonged to Xiao Qing. He shouldn't be the gloomy and scary teenager that appeared in his mind. That couldn't be him. Xiao Qing definitely wouldn't like him. As Dummy Air thought about it, he shivered and hugged Xiao Qing tightly. His beast instinct told him that those memories were not necessarily good, so he was somewhat resistant. The more a person with amnesia cooperated to find his memories, the faster he recovered. The more he resisted, the slower he recovered. This was normal. Air dye resisted. But no matter how much he resisted, he recovered bit by bit. This was also the reason why he became more and more silent. Sometimes he couldn't distinguish between reality and memory. But as long as he held Xiao Qing's hand, he would calm down. Because only in reality did he have Xiao Qing. If you could talk, you would. Xiao Qing touched Air Dai's cheek. She couldn't help but stop. If Air Dai recovered, he would probably leave. She imagined Air Dai changing into a different person. Perhaps the real Air Dai would be gentle and elegant, but always distant. Or maybe he would be calm and self-controlled. He wouldn't care about everything that happened when he lost his memory. He might even think that this relationship was ridiculous. Or maybe he would be serious and calm. He would think that it was humiliating to have the same woman as another man. But no matter how she thought, how she constructed, and what kind of personality she constructed, as long as she imagined that person as Air Dai, she would think that he was cute. She was hopeless. Even though she always told herself that if Air Dai recovered his memory and wanted to leave, she would let him go, she was always calm and prepared to imprison him if Air Dai left. This was her, a terrible, duplicitous woman. She was really capable of doing this. Imprisoning him by her side and chaining him up was probably a good choice. Then he wouldn't be able to leave. Even if he hated her, he could only stay by her side. With this thought, the corners of Xiao Qing's eyes turned red. She couldn't help but cover her face. Yan Qiue had indeed led her astray. She was already bad, but this wasn't bad either. Air Dai seriously pulled Xiao Qing's hand away and planted a kiss at the corner of her eye. The gentleness in his eyes was about to overflow. Xiao Qing hugged Air Dai's waist and closed her eyes in satisfaction. He could only be hers. No one could take him away. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.